Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Hannah? Richie? That the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of May 17, 2017 come to order at 6:32 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. So I'd ask everyone to stand if you're able while we sing the national anthem, and then please remain standing for a moment after that for private reflection or private prayer. And I'll go to Councillor Austin to lead us.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Please remain standing. Please be seated. And I turn to council. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in any of the matters on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. And for those in the audience, you're going to get you're going to get a potpourri of all the things we do as a township. You're going to get to participate in a public meeting on a planning matter, and then we'll be going into a council meeting and dealing with a deputation from Allenville District High School and then the Midhurst Ratepayers Association. So we have a full agenda, and we'll be having a pool on when we get out of here. Yes, Councillor Austin.
Mayor French, could you invite so there's some representatives from Allenville High School up there, and they don't realize that we have some seats reserved up at the front for Allenville District High School.
Actually, I think the teacher, if you want to bring them forward, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, they've been informed to come forward when they arrive here. So that's good, thank you. So the first thing we will do is we're going to move into the public meeting, and I'll need a resolution to enter into this public meeting, so I can have a mover and a seconder, Coughlin and Hannah. That this public meeting of the council held under section 34 of the Planning Act for the zoning bylaw amendment application ZB-2017-003 by Sean Nadeau be called to order at 6:36 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. You'll also get to observe how busy our clerk will be tonight. So that's what happens when we have meetings like this. So I actually have, for public meetings, when it comes under the Planning Act, there's part of it's a prepared script. So I'm going to read that. So welcome to this public meeting of Springwater Township Council held in compliance with Section 34 of the Planning Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views in regard to a proposed amendment to the Township of Springwater zoning bylaw as amended. The first part of this meeting is to present the amendment. Following that, an opportunity will be given to enable those who have any comments, concerns, or inquiries with regard to this proposal to make their views known to council. In addition to any comments made at this meeting, written presentations will also be welcomed by council. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township of Springwater in respect of a proposed zoning bylaw does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or written submissions to the Township of Springwater before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed, the Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of the appeal. Any persons who wish to speak should first give their name and address. All comments or questions should be addressed through the chair. Oral submissions will form part of the public meeting minutes record, including the name and address of the speaker, as information collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes of the meeting will be posted on the Township website. And as I mentioned, the application is ZB-2017-003 S. Nadeau at 2392 Ronald Road. So I'll now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates in which notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 26th day of April 2017 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 33 properties in the Township of Springwater within 120 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was also posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from Ronald Road and George Johnson Road.
Thank you. Has the Planning Department received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
Correspondence was received as followed from Simcoe County District School Board stating no objections, Enbridge stating no objections, the County of Simcoe stating that the county's Transportation and Engineering Department approved a reduction in the setback distance to 10 meters from the county right-of-way. Additionally, the applicant was advised that the entrance to the proposed dwelling must be off the local road. The chief building official from the Township of Springwater stating a 15-meter mantle is required beyond the distribution pipe in the direction of effluent travel of a sewage system for raised sewage systems. This expanding area acts as an additional area of retention to allow effluent to infiltrate into native ground. It would be his recommendation that the sewage layout be updated to reflect a raised septic bed with the required increased setback requirement, or the county should provide an opinion on having the mantle encroach an additional 1.1 meter. From Kelly and Jill Thompson of 2382 Ronald Road, stating that their first concern is that should the adjacent property's grade be raised, water runoff should be directed away from 2382 westward towards George Johnson Road. Ronald Road itself was elevated in years past, causing water runoff to find the property as a low point. Raising the grade would impact them negatively unless water can be directed westward. A second concern is whether a reduced lot size will be able to manage the septic demands of a residential dwelling and its proximity to their basement. A third concern is with the development along the property perimeter and its impact with the root systems of mature trees that run along the border of the two properties. That is both the rear lot line and the interior side lot line.
And I'll now turn to Amy Knapp, Township Planner, to give a brief explanation and purpose of the effect of this proposal. Amy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight's meeting is to explain the nature of this application and to obtain comments. With respect to the property, the subject lands are located in the Minising Settlement area on the northeast side of George Johnson Road and Ronald Road, municipally known as 2392 Ronald Road. The property is currently sized at 1,083 square meters of lot area, as 32 meters of lot frontage on George Johnson Road and 33.53 meters of lot frontage on Ronald Road. The property is surrounded by single-family residential land uses with some general commercial and institutional, which is the elementary school, within walking distance of this property. The property is currently designated urban residential, which does permit residential land uses, including what is being proposed, a single detached dwelling. However, the current zoning of the property is general commercial. Therefore, the applicant is proposing to rezone the property to a residential exception zone, which would permit the construction of a single detached residential unit. The lot will be serviced by municipal water and a private septic system. Specifically, the exceptions that the applicant is seeking for is to recognize the existing lot area of 1,083 square meters, the rear yard depth of, which is normally 7.5 meters, to a reduction down to 3.07 meters, an exterior side yard abutting Ronald Road, which is normally a 9-meter or 30 feet setback, down to 7.2 meters or 23.6 feet, and that's for the porch only. All other provisions of the zoning bylaw will be complied with. Part of the issues or the circumstances with this property is because it is dual frontage. Technically, the frontage or the front yard is considered to be George Johnson Road. However, in looking at the proposed site plan, which hopefully the clerk will pop up shortly, the house actually faces Ronald Road. So in terms of the proposed rear yard setback, it actually functions as a side yard setback. Typically, a residential side yard setback is 3 meters or 10 feet. So by all appearances, it would function in that same way. In terms of the front yard setback, it is normally the 9 meters as well. Normally, an encroachment, if this was considered to be the front yard, they would have required 7.8 meters, and in this case, it's actually 7.2. So by functionality, it comes pretty close. However, by definition, those are the exceptions that are required as a result of the lot configuration. As noted, it is on George Johnson Road, is a county road, and does require normally a 15-meter setback. And as you've heard from the comments tonight, the county has received or obtained approval for a reduced setback to 10 meters. Our front yard setback is 9 meters, so the application will conform to that. That concludes my presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you. I'll first go to the public. If anybody has a comment or concern, please come forward. Just take a chair right up here, pull the microphones towards you, give us your name and your address, and we'll make note of whatever your comments are. So I always go to the public first. So if you want to comment on this application, please come forward. Okay, since I don't see a rush, I will turn to council if there's any questions or comments on this particular application. Councilor McConkey.
I have one question, and I guess it's to our planning or to the councillor in the area. This is zone commercial right now, and when I think of commercial, I think of jobs. Do you see any issue, like was there a plan for George Johnson? Like I know we have the variety store down the road. Was there a plan for that area to be more for commercial use rather than residential? So I just wanted to understand why we would be going for residential, losing the potential for jobs.
Planner Knapp.
Through your worship, the applicant actually, when he bought the property, was wanting to have it to be a commercial mixed use or commercial property. Unfortunately, due to the significant requirements under the bylaw when it comes to parking and loading spaces and setback requirements, the lot just simply couldn't function as a commercial property. There's also daylighting triangle issues as well with that property, so nothing can actually really be located from a building perspective in that daylighting triangle. So as a result of the size of the lot and the config and the fact it is smaller in nature and would be, our staff, we consider it to be more appropriate for a residential land use versus a commercial land use.
Follow-up?
The question would be, if we do the reduction in the meter of the setback on the George Johnson Road, I know we've just gone through a widening, but future could have another widening. You don't know the future. Would that pose any problems in the future? I know the county's saying okay, but how much do you usually go for if you were to go for another lane?
Planner Knapp.
Yeah, through your worship, the zoning bylaw actually only requires a minimum of 9 meters. So this property, this setback actually would comply as of right. It's only the county that requires that additional 15 meters. And based on their comments, they are satisfied that at this point in time, They don't request a road widening or anything as a condition of this approval, so it's my understanding that because they've approved the variance to the reduced setback, that they're confident that there would be no further road widenings, in my estimation.
Other questions? Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. We heard through the clerk that there were comments from neighbors concerned about certain aspects of this proposal, and also recommendations from the chief building person on staff. And if we were to pass this bylaw, would those concerns be put in as conditions of approval?
I see our chief building officer back there, or maybe Planner Knapp wants to comment on this.
Absolutely. Through your worship, with respect to the issues or the concerns of lot grading, of course, as part of the building permit submission, lot grading has to be approved by the chief building official. And generally speaking, any drainage has to occur within the property lot lines and cannot be dispersed out to neighboring properties. With respect to your second question, with respect to the septic, tonight's meeting is just for public information and confirmation receiving of comments. So this is something that the applicant will be able to hopefully address as part of their building permit submission or upon my total evaluation of the application.
Follow-up?
But I thought, though, that this meeting was not just to receive comments, but also for council to vote on a motion to create a bylaw to change the zoning.
Planner Knapp?
Yes, that is certainly one option, is that council may go ahead and pass a bylaw. However, staff have not done a complete analysis. We typically will provide a follow-up report with this type of application to address all neighbors' concerns and bring forth a recommendation of whether or not a bylaw will be forth for passage.
Okay, and we have some options when it comes to that, such as referring it back to staff. Okay, any other questions of council on this public meeting? Okay, thank you for attending the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and showing an interest in the matter. So I need a mover and a second to adjourn this public meeting. Deputy Mayor Allen, Councillor Coghlan. That this public meeting held under Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, as amended, on a zoning bylaw amendment application ZB-2017-003 by Sean Nadeau, does now adjourn at 6:49 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. And now we'll have some direction on this, and I'll just give you an idea where it's going. So obviously, we've received the information in that, and our options are that the application be approved, an appropriate document be submitted to council for consideration, the application be refused, and the applicant be so notified, or that the application be referred back to staff. So whoever wants to move and has a comfort level, Councillor Hannan, what would you like to do?
I believe option A would be the one I would recommend.
Okay. Do I have a seconder on the, which is to approve? Councillor Coghlan?
Question on that, through you, Mayor French, to Planner Knapp. You were indicating that there is additional information that would be coming forward to council.
Through your worship, typically if council wishes to have the application come back, I would address those concerns with respect to the comments received at tonight, or address them, such as Councillor Austin's concerns with respect to the septic system. If council chooses for the application to come back with an additional report, I could contact the applicant and to make sure that that septic system can be physically fit on the property in accordance with the chief building official's comments.
I was just going to actually ask for some clarification. let's assuming we follow through with the motion that hasn't been duly seconded yet. You would still be bringing back the information for the final approval when it becomes before council anyway, would you not?
That is correct. If the application is not approved tonight, I would bring back a second report going through in more detail and analysis of the application. Should the application be approved tonight, we would forward the bylaw at the next meeting. At the end of the day, if the chief building official is not satisfied with the submission of the building permit with the appropriate septic system, they won't be able to get a building permit.
So, second, okay. That council, having held a public meeting in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1999 CP 13, as amended, on a zoning bylaw amendment application ZB-2017-003 by Sean Nadeau, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be approved and that the appropriate documents be submitted to council for consideration. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to kind of more exciting things. Some of us in council, we had the opportunity of participating in a really special event that we co-sponsored on, or actually I guess tri-sponsored, on Monday with this guest speaker from out west talking about some things that we do to kind of cause harm to our community. One of the suggestions in there is you really need to engage the youth to help them kind of build your community. And we know in Elmville, the students there are very active because I know they have that cleanup day and volunteer day. And but they're here with a good news story. I know they just had a trip. And so I invite whoever's going to comment, come forward, take a seat, and just pull the microphones towards you. Now, one thing I do want everybody in the audience to know, after we're finished this delegation deputation and their presentation, we are going to take a very brief 10-minute recess so we can go out and get some pictures with the students, and then we'll reconvene the rest of the meeting and go forward from there, just so you know. That's how we'll be doing it. So with that, maybe introduce yourselves and tell us about your trip.
Hi everybody, I'm Rachel and I'm an Elmville student from EDHS.
I'm Hannah Clunies-Ross and I'm one of the exchange students from the Yukon.
And just about a couple weeks ago, 10 students from EDHS, we went up to visit the Yukon near Haines Junction, and we paired with St. Elias Community School students and did a week of cultural activities up there, and we learned a lot, and we want to share it with you guys today. Okay. So our first day, we went to a wildlife preserve, and we learned a lot this day, a lot about the wildlife in the area. We saw a lot of Dall sheep, which was really cool. They're very common up there, just everywhere. And we saw some moose, which was neat because not all of us have seen moose before. I hadn't, so I was really excited about that. And we also learned that day that the Yukon is very dry and dusty, which was something I would not have expected. But you can see in the one photo that there's just dust swirling everywhere. And actually, a lot of the dust that is swirling is glacial silt in lots of places we visited, which was really cool to see. On that day, we also saw other animals such as lynx, Arctic fox, bison, and one of our EDHS students is wearing a lynx fur in that photo, and we saw a lot of caribou and moose antlers, and we played some outdoor games hosted by a wildlife preserve guide, which was really fun and a good way to get to know each other. That night, just to kind of relax, we were all really dirty from playing outside all day, so we went to Takini Hot Springs, which was a really fun, nice way to relax. And the water was like filled with all this copper and minerals, which was kind of cool because it's filled from the hot springs in the area, and it's a good way to chill in the afternoon. And we saw a grizzly bear that night. The day after was a really, really busy day. We went mountain biking and hiking. We split into 2 groups. So I was part of the mountain biking group. It was really fun because we were biking like through all these rocky trails, and it was neat. And at the end, we came to kind of like a mountain. It was more like something you'd see near Parry Sound, like the big rocks, and we climbed around in them, which was cool. Hannah was in the hiking group, so she might have a different experience she might want to share.
We just walked a lot slower. It was more like to enjoy the view and take lots of pictures and just look at the different types of plants along the trail and to just enjoy the park.
Lots of the plants there, we were there quite early, so really the only flowers we saw were crocuses, which are really like pretty purple fuzzy flowers. I think people really like that. Everyone really had fun that day, but we all got really muddy. And after that, we went to Kluane Lake and Arctic Institute for research, which was cool. So that night, I actually met somebody visiting from Europe who was studying about solar panels, and I got to learn about solar panels from him. And we went down to Kluane Lake, and we're just playing around. We're having a rock throwing competition. It was really fun. And the next morning, we had a photo competition, actually, which was cool because lots of our EDHS students are interested in photography because we have photography classes at our high school. So it was kind of an interesting thing for us to do. The next day we went to Sheep Creek and we hiked up a mountain, which was neat. Say we've climbed mountains now. It was lots of sheep, hence the name, climb up this mountain. So as you're climbing up, like you see like all the sheep fur and like over there. It's kind of funny. And we made it almost to the top and we got to have a really cool view of the area. I'm not sure if the top right photo is totally clear, but half of it is like, looks kind of gray and the other half is more white. About First Nations culture, a day where we were really intensive about that. So in the top left, there I am using an atlatl to throw a sphere because we're practicing for hunting caribou. So it was really cool. It was kind of like a crochet hook that makes it a bit easier to throw a spear and it gets it thrown very far. And we also had First Nations guides who taught us a lot about the culture in the area. So we learned that there's 2 clans. There's Crow and there's Wolf for the Champagne-Aishak people. And we also learned a lot about the shelters that were used when they lived off the land for winterizing and smoking their meat and storing their meat. But that night we had a potluck at the youth center in Haines Junction, which was really neat because it was an opportunity for us to try some foods of the area. So I think I tried bison roast, bison meatloaf, moose steak, bannock, salmon.
Fish for the first time.
Yeah, the fish didn't go so well. And then after that, we had some First Nations dancing, which was something we don't get to see here. So it was an awesome opportunity. Dakwakata dancers, yeah. And we also learned some games that are played at the Inuit and Arctic Games, right? Mm-hmm. So in the top right, you can see Lauren. She's from EDHS. And what we had to do in that picture was start on our shins and jump up onto our feet. And something about all the games we learned, they were to help us. They would be used practically for First Nations people when they were living off the land. So that one would be if a bear was coming, you'd have to hop to your feet really quick to get away. And there's another in the bottom left corner. We have Josh, who's playing a foot game. So he has to kick the white ball that's swinging and kick it, make sure his foot hits it, and it can get very competitive. We also had some hand games, which was very fun. And then the next day we had a really long road trip. We did some driving on the Haines Road, made a few pit stops. We went snowshoeing, which was really neat, and we saw some really young, rugged mountains, which was super cool. And I'd like to point out that this is in May. And it's all snowy, which is quite a shock because we don't have snow here in May. And we also went tobogganing that day and it was quite fun. This was our last day. We went for a glacial flight tour and I thought it was really neat because we were in Haines Junction and it looked super dry and not much snow. And as soon as you lift off the plane at the Haines Junction airport, you see like all these glaciers and snow that's like hidden, tucked away. So it's cool to know about the different landscapes in the area. And as we were flying, we were able to see like the Dall sheep like littered around the mountains and all the different types of glaciers. So that was neat. And not to mention the plane was a 6-seated Cessna, which was very small and a little bit nerve-wracking for lots of us who had just flown huge planes to get there. Super cool experience. And that's all I have to say. I'd like to say thank you for listening and thank you for donating to help us have such an awesome experience.
Well, you did very well, because usually I have to warn presenters and give them a 2-minute warning, but you finished about 5 seconds before my 2-minute warning, so it was obviously well prepared. And any comments or from council? Councillor Austin.
I'd like to ask Hannah, what is the most interesting thing that you have seen here in Elmville?
That's really hard.
Maple Syrup Festival.
Oh no, I have to think of all the things we've done so far, because we've done a lot. Yesterday we went to Toronto, and it was a very long, busy day. The most interesting thing, I think, was just like seeing how you guys are like more dependent on things like agriculture, and the different ways you guys or like the maple syrup and sorry, because in the Yukon we live off of mining and things like that, but here it's more like agriculture. The most interesting thing is definitely the smell of the cow poop. Yep.
We actually come to enjoy it.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I find your terminology of pirating very interesting. So I believe that's evidence of climate change, the negative effects. So be interested in what extent you saw that in different ways. You gave one example, but is pirating a significant problem from what you observed up there?
It's definitely not a common problem, like it's a huge shocker for them, but I'm not sure that they know the full effects yet, since this has happened in a span of over a year. So there's tons of researchers up there actually trying to figure out what's happening. And when I use the term pirating, I mean there's another river. The glacier has receded far enough that the full thing is going to go into other river instead of going past and opening into a new one. So the other one's just dried right up, which it's a change. They're just not really sure quite yet if it's a negative or positive, but they know it's definitely changing the way things flow into the ocean and lake levels. Kluane Lake actually has dropped quite significantly.
So you're going to be writing a letter to President Trump, I presume?
Any other questions? Councillor McConkey.
I just wanted to ask, how'd you do fishing today? I think? Or
Some of us did. Some of us just wanted to like stay in the hot sun and tan.
Oh, nice. Oh, wasn't it nice? Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. It was our pleasure to be part of it. And we're very fortunate, I mentioned Elmville District High School, but all of our student bodies and all of our schools in the township, they really do get involved in the community, and I think that's really important. And so we want all of our students to stay in Springwater. Even if you have to go away for a little bit for education, we want you to bring all those resources and that kind of intellect back and make Springwater a better place. So thank you. And so I'd like a mover and a seconder to accept this deputation. Coughlin, McConkey. That the delegation from Elmville District High School be received. All those in favor? Carried. And as I said, we're going to just take about less than 10 minutes, and we just want to go outside and take a picture with the group, and we'll be right back to carry on with the meeting. Okay, oh, there's Councillor Austin. Okay, we're going to reconvene our meeting here. And we have a deputation from the Midhurst Ratepayers Association. And Sandy Buxton is on my list here, so I assume she's coming forward, or maybe a co-presenter. And I understand you may want more than our 10-minute, is that correct? Or, yes, please. Okay, I need a motion to extend another 5 minutes, moved by Hannah, seconded by Alan. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried, so you do have 15 minutes.
Thank you.
And with that, please come forward.
I was going to request that as someone who has a hearing problem. You've heard me say this before. It's important that everyone hear what we have to say tonight. And if you could turn up the volume, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and make sure you pull the microphones towards you, so...
The purpose of this bylaw is to try and deal with a question which is not very obvious if one is in the middle of a Class EA, and that is namely, what can happen at the end? And the purpose of this bylaw is to give you a way to think about that problem and to give you a decision framework. And the most important thing to speak to, and I'll come to some of the ingredients leading to that, is that it is often said, and appears to be the community murmuring, that the council feels that it has to proceed and approve the assessment, approve the development. That's the way this is all set up. And the point of my presentation and then the bylaw itself as structured is to make a different point, which is this. In my submission to you, when you read all of the policy that is applicable and the standards of the policy set out in the Planning Act, the decision on what to do and what is consistent with policy and conforms with applicable provincial plans means no to the Class EA and no to the development. Now, you, of course, will need a very careful read of the reasons for that. They are in the draft bylaw. But the idea is that it is not, the Class EA is not an isolated decision in a framework where you have nothing else to consider and merely a Class EA to deal with. It fits into a provincial framework. And the framework, and I started with the word infrastructure because, of course, the water servicing project, or whatever one might call the project subject to the Class EA, is infrastructure. And it, moreover, is infrastructure dealing with water and wastewater. So the question and the way this is framed is, having regard for the framework and those policies, it's my submission that the Class EA has not looked at the policy framework. It has treated the Class EA as an island unto itself, and that if you look at the Class EA and look at the decision-making and the integrated framework that surrounds it, you will need to look at the provincial policy statement. You will need to look at how it integrates with the growth plan. And when you look at those things, my further submission is you will see you have a problem. It is not consistent. The submissions and the details on concerns are stated in the bylaw. There's a lengthy piece here in Part 5 that has a number of paragraphs. There is a decision at Part 6, and there is a framework speaking to your responsibilities. And I'll just say, to highlight, I haven't covered all of the topics relevant to this, but in addition to the Planning Act, the PPS, Places to Grow, the Class EA, you have the Municipal Act. The Municipal Act gives you exclusive, or rather I shouldn't say exclusive, clear authority over water. You also have the Safe Drinking Water Act, which gives you clear duties to ensure water is potable from your systems. There are a number of intersecting statutes here. They're all listed in the Class EA document that's supposed to guide what you have before you. But my review of it doesn't show that those things have been considered, which is the only the have regard for standard. You're subject to a higher standard. It's not just considering those things. You need to be consistent with the framework and the hierarchy. And the hierarchy is very clear. The environment where it has the most rigorous standard, that policy prevails. We could also tie this to public health or human health, which is another aspect of this. So the quality of water related to human health, the quantity of water and what it delivers to the downstream ecosystem, what it delivers to all the people on wells today, the wells and Barrie's water needs. There is a complicated problem here, and it has not been adequately addressed, not merely by the way the Class A has done it, but by provincial policy. And that, I've added a few extra minutes, and I'm sorry for that, Your Worship. I will cease.
Thank you. Very, very informative information. I'll turn to council if you have any particular questions. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor French. Thank you, Mr. Northey. I have lots of questions, but I'm not sure this is going to be the venue to get them all answered because I have to read this document further. But I think it's important that I also recognize the residents here from Springwater that have showed up here tonight obviously support the community, I guess, if you like, and everybody has concerns. And we're trying to support the residents and make sure we get it done right. We've had different opinions from our engineer, if you like, from our legal experts. I'm not sure what authority we really have. We can always do things and make decisions, I've been told that, but there's consequences if we don't have legal support for our decisions. So based on what you've said here tonight, if you have some idea of where we could get some legal justification for making our decisions, I'd like to hear it.
I think thank you, Councillor. I think the legal support is in the bylaw itself by referencing the various statutes and what those statutes provide this municipality with authority to do, and with reference to the provincial policy statement, which sets out a bunch of duties that the municipality must comply with. So the way I really would leave it with you is it's not an engineering problem alone. It is a policy and integration problem, and the way the province now describes what we're supposed to do, all of us, all making municipal decisions, is to follow the policy system and its hierarchy. And if you do that, I think you will see there are problems with this Class EA and this project. So I think the stuff is really, with respect, in the document. I'm happy to, once somebody has read it more time, I acknowledge all this. I'm getting a conversation started, if I could put it that way, in a very limited amount of time. I'm not sure what else to say.
Okay, thank you. Just one quick response then. So after we determine all these things that you're suggesting, we'd have to find that our EA that we have to this point, that it's not consistent or it's not accurate in order to be able to go forward with your recommendations in this bylaw.
That's correct. The test is not accuracy, it's consistency. Yes.
Councillor McConkey.
Thank you for the presentation, but I will say it's information overload for me tonight.
Okay.
Just thrown this, a huge bylaw. You're talking about problems with the, why do you say that we're not following the policy framework? I do not see, the presentation did not outline where I did not follow the policy framework. I need some more groundwork. You're saying it's not in engineering, it's a policy and integration. I need more staff involvement to understand what you're saying here. Have you put your things into questions? What are you asking of me from this deputation?
I think it's for your information, Councillor. And it's really...
But you've put towards a bylaw, so you must want a bylaw to achieve a certain goal. So what is the issue that you are trying to address?
Well, I think I have spoken to that. It's the decision. Okay, well, respect, if I didn't, I was...
It's information overload for me tonight, so if you can clearly state what the issue is, I'd appreciate it.
The issue is what decision or decisions should this council make regarding the Class EA and the project subject to the Class EA? Full stop. What decisions should this council make on the Class EA, on the servicing project, and the project itself?
So so that's the issue? What
It is.
decisions?
Yeah.
So what is the issue of our decisions?
Well, you haven't made those decisions, and
Yeah.
what my submission to you is that in making that decision, you should look at the provincial framework, the policy-led framework, and ensure, because the Class EA doesn't appear to address it, ensure that your responsibilities under the statutes are met.
Okay, and can you identify where they're not met?
I think I've spoken to that. That's the point I've been making.
Okay, I guess I'll have to read the documentation and really clearly understand where we have not met that, and I'd have to have
Well,
further
this-
discussions with expertise.
As I said, Councillor, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. The point is simply to start a conversation that is an important conversation. There's no obvious place to start it. It's starting tonight.
I know, but being a bylaw, that's, to me, there is a process right now where you can ask any questions and give any feedback into the EA. The EA is not closed yet. So I was expecting tonight that you were going to have more information, additional information, so that we could take back to our staff or our engineers and ask them these questions. Now I will be reading this bylaw to understand where the missing parts are.
The conversation, as I understood it, was that we were not to go back over ground that the ratepayers had covered previously. This is not ground we've covered previously. This is the framework of policy and law, and you do have legal counsel. I'm very familiar with your legal counsel. The idea was to change the conversation a bit away from just a technical discussion towards a question of how do you make decisions under the current provincial framework.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor French, thank you for the presentation. So this is a lot, and it is obviously very well thought out and valuable information. So I think that it would make sense for us all to study this, and maybe we should meet as a council in a closed session with our lawyer and with yourself to further explore the content of this, the implications of passing a bylaw like this. What, in your opinion, if a council did pass this, then what would be the next steps, given the fact that there's a draft EA with the MOE at this point in time? What would you see the course of events being?
Well, they're dramatic in the sense that the last page suggests that if you accept the logic of the bylaw and where it leads, it would be that the EA is rejected and the project is refused. So the question really is, where are you now, and what steps going forward can you take, should you take, etc. And all I'm trying to do is introduce into this that right now the framing of this has been a very technical discussion in the Class EA terminology and process, and the larger picture of policy and law has not really been, in my awareness, covered. The purpose of this presentation tonight is to try, as in our best way of timing, following the guidance of my client, to try and say, here are some other things before you go any further that we strongly urge this council to look at.
Well, as a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, I think it's incumbent upon us as a council to study this and to have a further session with you and with our lawyer to explore all aspects of this.
I think that would be warranted, and I appreciate it.
Okay, any other, Councillor Austin?
Thank you, Mayor French. Thank you for the presentation. At the beginning, at the first half of the presentation, you were talking about certain policy statements and provincial policy statements, and part of it was underlined and everything. And as Councillor McConkey pointed out, it was information overload. Those are key. That was key information that you presented, but there's no way I can remember it all, but I can't find it in this document here. So if, as Deputy Mayor Alvin suggests, we need to
We have a copy
study
of the
this.
presentation.
We have a copy of the presentation? Okay, because I need that information just to put everything into context.
I do appreciate that. I appreciate the comment of overload. I'm not trying to be flippant in the slightest on this. There is more to this than even the presentation provides. So the idea was to get a conversation started on a different path in covering some different topics than what has been going on to date. So I do appreciate, Councillor, very much. A lot's been thrown at you. I just hope it starts a conversation.
Okay. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I would love to engage with you with questions this evening. I did ask when the agenda came out for the parameters of the delegation. I was told that there was nothing available, but seeing this, I don't think this was done last night, so I don't understand why what the intent was in giving us this overload rather than providing it to us in advance so that we could engage with you here.
Well, everything's in a context. When was this ready? It was ready earlier today as revised. So I'm sorry that I didn't have this done weeks in advance. This just simply didn't happen. I was getting to a deadline, which was to speak tonight, and I don't know what else to say. That's the best I could do.
No, and I appreciate that. I wish I could engage with you, but like I said, everybody else, I am caught off guard by this. I was trying to rack my brain as to why is there so many people showing up tonight and what's happening. So, yeah, again, this is a shock to me. Not a shock to me that it's happening, but it's not what I expected this evening.
Okay, well, I do apologize for a shock. I think it's really the intent is try and get something started, and I didn't see a simpler way to do it.
Councillor Hannan, do you have something? Because I'll make final comments. I'll go to you as the last comment on this.
Okay,
Because
thank
we're running
you.
out of time.
My question was going to be, can we get a copy of the presentation? I understand that we have it. And I want to, again, thank you, and I'm sorry if we seem like we're being difficult, but we've had
No,
so much misinformation over the last, well, I have anyway, over the last 6.5 years. This is a little bit new. I appreciate it, and I'm sure there'll be lots more questions coming forward. But again, thank you for trying to help us understand.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, well, Deputy Mayor Allen, then Councillor, because we have
Thank
to
you,
move
Mayor
on.
French. So I'd like to, do you require a motion to move to the next step, to have a follow-up meeting, or how would you like?
Okay, my suggestion is that, when it comes to, sorry? Mr. Brindley, but I think one of the comments I'd like to make is, when you have a legal situation, you have representation for proponents and the other party. And I'm definitely, I'll just say right now, I certainly, obviously, like all the information. I think it's put in a concise way. Quite honestly, I've heard it all in different variations over the many years, because I've followed this very closely, because I think people know I have concerns about building cities in small villages in rural Ontario. But I don't think it's appropriate to put a motion forward without the input and advice from our legal counsel. I think that would be irresponsible, and we're not carrying out our responsibilities. With that, CAO Brindley, you have some comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, just what you said. My preference is this be referred to staff for comment and referred to our legal team. I would not want to predispose how we engage at this time, but now I think we need to digest. Staff have not even seen this yet, with the bylaw at all, and our legal has not seen it. So my recommendation, I apologize, is to refer to staff and our solicitor for comment.
Okay, other comments or questions? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor French, and thank you for coming for the presentation. And I agree with our CEO that, we got to get a second opinion and talk to our legal counsel and go from there. Because there is a process that's laid out that we have to follow, but it doesn't hurt to look at everything as we move along the process. But thanks again for coming.
Thank you, Councillor.
And I think I would like to make a comment. The approval of this entire development, the EA is an element of it, but you kind of suggest it's being treated separately. I don't agree with that. It's being treated as an all-encompassing part of the 150 conditions, and there's a lot of entails that are connected to each other. Let's assume the EA stood on its own. That's not the end of it. I mean, we have a whole lot of other work to do, so that's why I think we'd be irresponsible if we're not kind of getting our own input from a legal position, because, even though this council, I totally agree, this council, we could pass a resolution tonight, say, we're not proceeding with the MSP. We could pass a resolution tonight, we're not continuing, or we don't find the EA acceptable. It'd be pretty difficult to say I'm not accepting the EA when we haven't even seen the comments from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. But we can still do that. But the reality is, that does not negate anybody's ability to take action against this municipality. And I think you would have to agree to that. And if you don't, I'd be surprised.
Yes, it's a matter of what kind of action people can take.
And that's all I'm saying.
And the bylaw is designed to short-circuit various actions.
Yes, but people have a right to
Absolutely.
be treated what they feel is fair, whether we think it is or not. So I just want to comment on that. Okay, no, that's good discussion, good input, and obviously, you know, if it takes it down a different road and a different approach to this, we'll definitely undertake it, because there's many, many questions, and it's not just the EA. There's lots of aspects of, you know, this huge development that we're undertaking that have to be answered, and they are going to be answered over a period of time. I'm not sure when. And I don't even think I'll ask for kind of any comment from professional staff at this point, because they haven't had the opportunity to kind of review it. And as suggested, we should review it. So with that, can I have a mover and a second to accept the delegation? Councillor Hannah? Councillor Ritchie? That the delegation from the Midhurst Ratepayers Association be received. All those in favor? Sorry,
Mayor
Councillor
French,
Coggan.
I believe that the council was looking to refer this to staff as well.
Would you like that added to the, sure, please. And I think Councillor Hannah and Councillor Rich, you're supportive of that?
And I think the third thing was that the documentation provided during the delegation be made available to the public was the third concern.
I guess the information, because it's been at a public meeting, is in the public domain at the present time. Yes, Councillor Coghlan.
The concern I have with that, with all due respect, Mayor French, is that members of the public who read the agenda didn't know that there was a bylaw or this intent there. So I think that we should provide this information to the rest of the public, because there might have been members attend tonight had they known what the contents of the delegation were.
Very good point. So we will definitely note that in the resolution.
And I assume everybody's going to stay for the whole meeting? No? It's a real short one.
Okay, just so Councillor Hannah and Councillor Ritchie, the resolution read that the delegation from the Midhurst Ratepayers Association be received, and that the correspondence received be made available publicly, and that it be referred to staff. Is everybody on side with that? All those in favor? Carried. So thank you for that delegation. Well done and good information, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to, actually, if some of you want to leave, we'll just take a little pause.
I want to give you that.
Thank you.
Well, I want to give you a copy of it. I'll run and get a photocopy.
Stand up. We're leaving.
No, I'm hearing questions.
Oh, all right. Yes, thank you.
Just to hear the questions.
Oh, many question periods.
No.
For some time. There is no question period.
Oh, it's question hearing not?
We're going to go on.
Have to have it, I can't move.
No.
Jack?
Okay, we will carry on. So we're moving on to previous minutes and adoption. And we have items 8.2 to 8.4 to get it on the floor. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Richie? Hannah? Is there any of these you'd like to discuss separately or questions on it? We're dealing with the minutes at the moment. 8.2 to 8.4. Not the boards or committees yet, just the minutes of the meetings. Okay. Moved by Ritchie, second by Hannah, that the minutes of council items 8.2 through to 8.4 be approved as presented. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Now we're moving on to minutes of boards, committees, and organizations. And I need a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor. On one of them? Okay, okay. Move, Counselor Coghlan, second by Counselor Hannah. Okay, is there any you'd like to pull? Okay, Counselor Coghlan?
8.7?
Any other you'd like to pull?
8.6?
Anything else? I think there's only one. That's it. Oh, that, yeah, yes. Okay, so we will hold the resolution. I guess, and discuss the Rec Advisory Committee minutes. Councillor Coghlan, I think you brought that one up. Or, sorry, Councillor McConkey.
On 8.6, we talked about a draft recreation association, the operations. So it looks like staff has prepared something on how the rec boards are to operate, and I have not seen draft community recreation association operation. The director provided an overview of the draft policy. I'd like to know when we're going to see that policy. And then it also goes on to talk about the Canada 150. I wanted to know if the application forms have been sent to all the hall boards, and if Scott McKenzie and Carrie received those from my area. And I noticed that the skateboard, oh no, that's a different thing. Okay, that's it, that's the tube. It's mainly the draft. We've been talking about that for a long time, and I was wondering if there's a draft policy that we can review on that.
I guess I'll turn to Director Belcourt.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through to Councilor McConkey. It's scheduled to come before council at the June 7th meeting to review the operations, draft operations policy, the draft cost sharing policy, and the user fee policy as well. With regards to the applications for the Canada 150, they were sent to all the hall boards, with 2 being received back already. We did not send one to Carrie at Grenfell as she resigned from the board, I've been told. And I'll have to follow up with the Snow Valley Highland residents.
I heard something about the resignation, but I've not seen, it wasn't, hasn't been confirmed. And so I think that we need something in writing before we assume that that's happened. So, because I haven't heard, like I've just heard through a grapevine, so I'd like confirmation if someone has resigned and who would get that information then.
Director Belcourt, any comments?
I was notified through the previous community development officer that she'd received notification of it. I did not personally see the email, but it was confirmed with the remaining member on the board, Mr. Mike Moore.
Okay, I'll follow up with him.
Thank you. Was there, okay, your question answered? Okay, good. Okay, move on to the next item. Councillor Coghlan.
I guess first would be a clarification. Can we approve draft minutes if it hasn't been approved by the committee? But then the motions contained with therein come up later in our agenda, starting at 10.5. So if these minutes haven't been approved by the Finance and Audit Committee, how then are we able to vote on their motions?
Any comment, Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. I think the idea is that the meeting that was held on May 10th was to address a number of items which are, as you mentioned, are in item 10 of this evening's agenda. The intent is that the draft financial statements, a little bit of a time crunch, if you will, in that we're trying to get those approved tonight, being the last meeting in May. And why the time crunch is that we need our financial statements approved tonight, preferably, in order for us to ensure that our financial information return, or our FIR, is submitted to the ministry before the end of this month. If the FIR is not submitted before the end of this month, which is predicated on what's in the financial statements, it could impact timing of funding on a go-forward basis.
Madam Clerk.
And also on a procedural matter for that, the motions are moved, seconded, and carried. That won't affect the minutes, whether the minutes are in draft form or approved. The motions stand as they were approved at the meeting.
So here we're simply accepting the information, and then we will deal with individual items and either accept or reject. Is that what you're saying, Madam Clerk? Okay. Follow-up, Councillor Coghlan?
The rest of the questions can come in at 10.12.
Okay, with that in mind, then I think the resolution obviously can be dealt with as it was worded. Moved by Coghlan, second by Hanna, that the minutes of boards, committees, and other organizations, item 8.6 through to 8.7, be received as information. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now we have question period. And invite anybody to come forward that has a question. You have a couple minutes to get to your question, and depending on how long it takes to respond to it, we have a 10-minute time frame to deal with this. So name, address, and pose your question as quickly
Connie
as possible.
Speck, 47 Doran Road, Midhurst. My question tonight is sort of a follow-on from that presentation, because I've been really reviewing the EA documents and a lot of other material in detail, and it seems to me there are considerable gaps. We haven't done any surveys of well users in the area. We don't know how they could be impacted, but I thought I'd provide one piece of information that's critical to council tonight. I'm on a private well, but I also have a letter from the Ministry of Environment informing our family that we cannot be forced to go on municipal water. That has serious implications for you as a council and as a township. What it means is, if these massive wells impact my well, I can thumb my nose at your water line and say, I want a new well. So I'm already at 185 feet, so that could mean I might need a 250-foot deep well, brand new well, or a 300-foot deep well. And there are lots and lots of well owners still within Midhurst, and I would say there's a precedent there, if I have that letter, that everybody would be entitled to say to the township, I do not want to go on municipal water, so drill me a well. So I think it would behoove council to act preemptively and at least do a household survey to find out what would be the financial implications if there are a lot of us out there who could be impacted. So my question is, have you budgeted funds if you had to drill, say, 50 deep wells to replace water? And in particular, if it's a farm well that's impacted, they may need a big water source or a really deep well. So I'm just wondering tonight, has any thought been given to setting aside budgetary funds if you approve the existing EA to cover the cost of all this well drilling? And I open to anyone on council who wishes to answer.
CEO Brinley, do you want to take that one on?
Thank you, Mayor French. I would simply say that this question be referred to the EA. It's, we have a process, and it be referred to the EA process.
And there's a number of financial implications. I guess when we get the, the response from the ministry that we as a council have to deal with. Right now, we're, a lot of supposition. Of course, the simple answer is that we put in our budget right now? Absolutely not, because we have no idea what we're talking about, and hopefully as we get the information back, we will be able to prepare the appropriate kind of questions and look at it from a financial analysis standpoint, and that's why we do a long-term financial plan. But as of today, if we set, for 50 wells or 100 wells, absolutely not.
And my follow-up to that, the second part of my question would be, then you have to make sure that this current EA starts to fill the gaps that are there. No house-to-house survey, no long-term pumping, as many, many other municipalities are doing in Southern Ontario. Most a minimum of 30 days with proponents paying to pipe that water away. We should be approaching places like Halton and so on to find out what are the financial implications for us as a municipality if we don't ask those questions up front and cover those bases. Because if those gaps exist in the existing AA and we go ahead and improve it and approve it, what costs, what hidden costs are sitting there? And they could be massive for our municipality. So I'm hoping we'll go beyond just refer it to the AA. And as a council, you might start to consider contacting other municipalities. That's what councillors do. That's what deputy mayors and mayors do. They talk one-on-one and say, hey, what are the issues you've faced and how have you protected your taxpayers? So this to me is just, I'm putting up a red flag saying, I'm sitting there with that letter, which would give, I think, all the other wells that could be impacted grounds to go after our municipality and say, you're drilling me a new well. But I do thank you tonight for your time, and I really appreciate that. And I hope to see more going into the A to deal with some of these serious shortfalls. Thank you.
Thank you. How's it?
Good evening, Kevin Newman, 3 Civilwood Crescent. I'm just going to start off by saying thank you for tonight. As many of you who know me on a personal basis will know, I am a very plain-spoken individual. So my question is simple. I would like to know what the status of Deputy Mayor Allen's motion or request, I'm not quite sure if it made it to motion, was to have the Midhurst ratepayers lawyer meet with council on in a perhaps a closed session where you can speak more frankly because it's not being recorded and dissected by everybody. Of course, that would be subject to the approval of your of Township's legal team and or lawyer or whoever, and you would have anybody in that meeting who you felt needed to be there, such as heads of staff of other various departments which may be impacted. But I would just encourage council to have a plain-spoken, no BS closed session meeting with the lawyers so that you can actually ask some of the more uncomfortable questions or pointed, I will go with pointed questions that maybe council might have that certainly this document might raise. So if I could have the answer to that question, please.
Well, the answer I made clear. We're going to take the information tonight, review it with our legal counsel. We're not going to table a resolution setting something up that maybe our legal counsel doesn't think is a good idea. You have your legal representation. The township has this legal representation. So Deputy Mayor Allen is he can certainly put it forward as a notice of motion at the end of this meeting, but right now there's no motion on the table to do any such thing.
Okay, so that explains the status of Deputy Mayor Allen's motion. Thank you. Again, I wasn't sure of the procedural issues, and this is very complicated to me. So now I pose a follow-up hypothetical question to you, which is assuming that your legal team signs off and says, yes, there is no jeopardy for the council or the township in any capacity for having a closed session meeting with the lawyer of the Midhurst Ratepayers Association. Would the council, hypothetically, without actually committing to anything, be willing to meet that individual under a closed setting circumstances?
The simple answer to that would be council's will.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'm not going to poll council on a hypothetical situation. That would
Fair
not
enough.
be appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment or a question? I think we only have a minute or so left, so please come forward.
Yes, it's John Hawthorne, 3802 Horseshoe Valley Road West. I know I've been out of the loop on all this, but I'm just curious, the Ann Street Carson part, are they included in the environmental assessment of 3 and 4, or is that totally separate?
No, actually, all lands that have been approved and even in phase 2, they're all part of the environmental assessment. Anything that would be built out for the next 25, 30 years is part of the environmental assessment. It's not staged. They had to suggest right from the beginning whether they build one house or, I guess, 7,622 or whatever it is today. Basically, they have to prove that it's feasible.
Now, that land has been approved for development, though.
Subject to 150 conditions.
Okay. The other thing, they've been drilling for water there along, I guess it was in April, for 3 weeks along Wilson. There was an outhouse sitting there, and then and just over a little bit, it's at just up from Snow Valley and Carson Road. There's a large well drilling outfit, and they drill wells, and then I've noticed there's a pipe there with a lockbox on top. So, I mean, are they starting to get the welling put in now, or is that just a test hole, or would you know?
Well, actually, I'll go to CEO Brindley. I have an answer, but it might not be the right one, so I'll give it to CEO Brindley.
Actually, Your Worship, through to Mr. Hawthorne, I'm not sure whose well that is. The wells that are being anticipated for development are actually farther west. So that well itself, I don't know, it could be something that the county is doing. I just don't have that information. I'm sorry. We can find out. I just don't have that information here.
Okay, that would be.
Yeah, no, we can find out, and because his answer is better than mine, because I was going to say it could be very well be a test well, but it's definitely not a servicing well, because there's obviously the approvals. We haven't went that far down the road. We know where the wells are going to go based on information in that, but obviously there's really no construction of any kind at this point in time on any of the developments, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that we used up more than our 10 minutes. Okay, I'm getting a nod. Okay, thank you. Those are good questions, good comments. Appreciate it. So now we'll move on to 10. Okay. Oh, yes. Oh, what? Okay. Yeah, no, I have no problem. So we'd like to move 12.5 up in the agenda, because I think we have someone here that might be interested in that. And that's the action report on Stone Manor Woods Red Line revision. And first of all, I'll let our poor clerk get there and see if we can find a resolution to get the discussion on the table. So basically, I'll give you now, I'll tell you what the resolution is, and then you can decide if you want to move or second it. That the report from the Director of Planning Services regarding Stone Manor Woods Red Line revision and Phase 2 subdivision agreement date May 17, 2017 be received. The Council endorsed the proposed Red Line revisions required to update the plan of subdivision and lot numbers within the condition of draft plan approval, that the Mayor and Clerk execute the subdivision agreement for Phase 2, which is to be registered subject to the clearance of remaining draft plan conditions of approval. So I'm going to have a mover and a seconder to get it on the table. Alan, Hannah. Okay, with that, Director Spagnuolo, it would be good just kind of give us an overview to get us going in the right direction.
Thank you, Mayor French. This report comes to you as the final step in this process to finalize approvals that were granted to allow for an additional 24 units for the entire subdivision. Staff is recommending approval of the proposed red line revisions and also asking for authorization to for the mayor and clerk to execute a development agreement which has been drafted and is very close to being completed to allow for registration of the subdivision.
And just for clarification, we saw the reconfiguration of lots some time ago. So basically, this is confirming that this will be the way it's developed. Is that what we're doing? Just, we're not doing something new. There's no changes from what we agreed to, subject to some conditions?
That is correct, Mayor French. This is the red line revision that is in front of council tonight is consistent with the public process that was completed in 2016, which considered revamping the zoning to allow for the lot increase of 24 additional lots for the entire subdivision, so it is consistent.
Okay, questions of council? Okay, so moved by Alan, and second by Hannah. Do you want me to read it again? Okay, okay. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So now we'll backtrack to, oh, sorry, Councillor Austin.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor French. This is directed to the clerk. For some reason, I'm not able to pull up reports. I seem to have lost access to internet.
I'm just going to go out and try to get back in and see it.
Okay, let's check out our technical difficulties, and then we will regroup back to 10 on the agenda, 10.1, just so everybody knows where we're going.
Mr. Mayor, it worked for me. I'm not sure why it's not working for others.
Are you hardwired there? Okay. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. View over Jack's shoulder there. Okay. For those at home, we're just pausing for some technical difficulties. But the first one we have 10.1, and there's a number of items here. So I need to get it on the floor. So can I have a mover and a seconder, and basically this resolution at the moment, the recommendation from Finance and Audit Committee containing items 10.2 through to 10.8 be approved as presented. I'm sure there'll be some pulled, but can I have a mover and a seconder to get the main agenda? Richie Coughlin. Okay, and what would we like pulled? Councillor Austin.
10.7.
10.7. Any others you'd like to pull? Okay, comment? Well, maybe we'll start with the comments. Councillor Coughlin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor French, Director Schmidt, and the Finance and Audit Committee. Appreciate all the work that has gone into making this possible for us, especially to Director Schmidt and his staff. There was a lot of hours spent over the last few days on this, but understanding that the diligence and effort this council puts into budget proceedings is quite at length and is very in-depth, and it is in my opinion that this process deserves maybe not as long, but definitely more of an opportunity to come to a better understanding of the reserves, the reserve funds, and the surpluses available. Saying that the Finance and Audit Committee recommendations, the concern I have with the minutes as they're reflected is that when we as a council receive Finance and Audit Committee recommendations, it's coming from the Finance and Audit Committee and could maybe potentially not be that reflected of the Finance Department. And that is something that I'm well respected. These gentlemen are a lot smarter in finance than I am. But I do want that if there isn't ever an opportunity where the Finance and Audit Committee's suggestion or advice is different than that of staff, I think that there should be an amendment when the agenda from the meeting reads different than the minutes. Therefore, there was an amendment, but there's no amendment noted. Similarly to if during a Recreation Advisory Committee meeting, Director Belcourt potentially or hypothetically came forward and said, we need a 10% increase in ice rates in order to have our 80% cost recovery. And if the RAC committee said, no, we're just going to go with 2%, the recommendation is going to come forward from RAC that we are at 2%, but this council should be aware that the Director of Public Works said 10%. So it's just that information that I'm looking for. Further comments, so on the process and the diligence, a lot of the concerns I had in this were pertaining to investments and investment plans and the $11 million and how that happens and who authorized to do it. So it was just a lot of information. And I do think that in order for the Finance Department to be able to have an aggressive investment strategy, more direction from this council as to where we're going. And I mean, we have a lot of balls up in the air right now. Other was the audit. The auditor, it was brought to my attention that even though it's requesting for 5 years, it wouldn't be fettering future councils, but that it's an annual contract. So my question is, why are we approving something for 5 years if it's an annual contract? And I think that Director Schmidt answered most of the other ones. Oh, page number 4, it speaks to a Bell agreement at station number 3. I don't know what that is, just for my own. Director Belcourt?
Maybe, or shall I go to Director Belcourt, or, okay. Parks and Properties, Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Coghlan. The Bell agreement at Station 3 is for hosting the tower site on our township property. So it's a lease program for that tower.
Sorry?
Director Schmidt or Director or CEO Brindley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. As Director Belcourt mentioned, there is a tower on that property, and Bell utilizes that tower, and in doing so provides us with revenue. It's a lease. They're leasing property from us.
And that's new or not new?
The agreement
The agreement
was
is new,
revised.
but the tower is not new?
No, it's
Okay.
been there for a number of years.
Thank you. And then on 10.5, it says that the Hall Board 2 2016 year-end results is an information report be received, but then in there is direction provided to staff. So I just wanted clarification on that, because typically when we receive information or information reports, there's no direction or resolution in there.
Director Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Councillor Coghlan. So you're correct, is that there were a number of items, obviously, that were dealt with at the Finance and Audit Committee on May 10th, of which 10.5 and 10.7, there were amendments. Other than that, essentially the recommendations provided by staff are as they are listed here this evening. So it's 10.5 and 10.7, I believe it is, that were amended by the committee. And as for speaking to those amendments, I would probably redirect those to our Chair of Finance and Audit Committee. I can speak to them generally, but they came from the committee, so.
Maybe before I have Deputy Mayor Allen from the committee, I think one of the questions was, those amendments, were you, like, as staff, are you supportive of the amendments? I think would be a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the first one with regards to the Hall Board, the intent of as we discussed at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, the intent of the report was just simply to provide council and the committee with the position of where our community halls reside, if you will, at the end of the year as it relates to financially. And then obviously conversation alluded to where are we at with community hall boards and the operations. And so I'm not necessarily against the recommendations, The timing might be a little tight for us, but as Director Belcourt mentioned, we do have some things in draft. I guess what I would say is that I would just caution, if you will, council, maybe not caution isn't the word, but the correct word, but this whole initiative with community hall boards is not something that is going to happen overnight, and I realize that it's taken more time than what we originally intended. It's going to take more time as well. We're transitioning. We don't want to send the wrong message to our hall boards. We are trying to transition. We are trying to make some changes, and we have made some changes already throughout 2017, and we'll continue to do that. And I think the hall boards, for the most part, are content, I guess is a better word. I haven't heard any resentment against these changes. So again, we're trying to move forward. The timeline to do some of the financial analysis that's required to determine how much money is potentially still available for some of the community halls, that's going to take some time. It's not just simply looking at 2016 and divvying out money. It's looking at past years and trying to figure out where did the money actually come from. And I've been here since 2013, December 2013. Before that, I got to dig into some of that detail. So it's going to take some time. And I don't want to delay the process. We are trying to move forward with the operation. And again, we're making transitions, but some of these other things might take a little bit longer than what council is hoping for.
Thank you, and now I'll go to Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French, and thank you, Councillor Coghlan. I and my fellow committee member, Councillor Hand, would be happy to address your points, but I just need to repeat them. I think the first one was if there's the recommendations are the committee's recommendations, and presently Councillor Hanna and I sit on the committee. But if there's disagreement from the staff, being Director Schmidt, is that expressed? Is that what your first point was?
Sorry. Thank you, through you, Mayor French. No, my concern is that as council, as members of council, when it comes to the finances and we sit through a budget process and we hear from our director and members of his staff, and then as a council we get to make decisions based on information from staff. Whereas when the information comes forward about how we're going to handle surpluses and investments and not necessarily investments, but things of that nature, I want to hear from staff. So while I appreciate that the recommendations are coming forward from, and I sincerely value both of your experience and your knowledge, I want to hear from staff. So it's difficult, other than, it's actually not difficult. I'm very lucky that we are very lucky that we can knock on their door and they sit down with us and they go over it. But to me, it seems like there's almost an extra step in there that might not need to be there. That's my concern, is that I think that staff are that's my concern.
Well, the terms of reference of the Finance and Audit Committee, if you go back and review those, were discussed with council and agreed upon by council, and I guess the terms of reference were such that there was value to be added by a Finance and Audit Committee. We do take the reports of staff, of Director Schmidt and staff. We do take his recommendations. We discuss those. We adjust them with his agreement, and if there's disagreement in Director Schmidt, then that is documented in any motion. There haven't been any such instances where Councillor Hanna and I on the Finance and Audit Committee have thought one thing and Director Schmidt has thought another, and we've gone ahead and made that motion. That hasn't arisen since the committee was formed. So if you go back to the purpose of the Finance and Audit Committee, it was to review quite a bit of detail at different times in the year, and the reports and the recommendations of staff, to then turn around and make recommendations of to the council before it's finally passed.
Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor French, to Deputy Allen. And I appreciate that. If, let's say, the Finance and Audit Committee was comprised of myself and another member, I'm going to use Councillor Ritchie, sorry. This council, would you not want to hear from staff, or would you want to know what I think we should do with it?
Through you, Mayor, keep in mind that all these meetings are open, and available for any council member to come and sit and observe, just as a RAC committee is, just as any other committee is. So we would welcome anybody who's interested in coming in and sitting in and hearing the discussion. And we would likely seek input or reaction for anybody who attended if they wanted to give that input.
Actually, I think that's a valid point. The reality is that we do have a committee providing kind of suggestions, advice, or whatever, and probably the venue to ask the questions is here, and we're asking the questions, and I think that's great. And I think rather than, you know, at the, you can go to the committee meeting and whatever, but I think this is the venue to ask the questions, well, you know, is staff on side in that? I think this is the appropriate venue to kind of vent that or vet it, you know. So I think it's quite appropriate to ask the questions we're asking tonight. I think, I'm not sure there is another mechanism that will work any better, would be my comment.
Duly noted.
No, I was trying to be helpful. Councillor Hanna.
I would think if the councillor has a question, this is a good time, and go ahead and ask it. I think that's, as the mayor's pointed out, so whatever your question is, let's hear it. But just so you know, there's a lot of discussion. This meeting that started at 2 o'clock, I understood would be over at 3. We were still there to 5:15. I missed the golf game because of it. So we put a lot of time in, a lot of discussions, and our Director of Finance, is not like we overruled him. It's a joint discussion. I wouldn't say it's the 3 wise men. It's 2.5, I'm the half. So it's a lot of discussion, a lot of work goes into this. So further to the invite that other people can attend, just remember, if we're more than 3, it's a meeting of council.
Okay, actually, Councillor McConkie, and then back to Councillor Coghlan.
So would I assume then that Councillor Hanna and the Deputy Mayor are in alignment with what has been presented and they have no further questions then? Okay. So I think that's where Councillor Coghlan was heading. No, maybe I'm wrong, because sometimes when a committee has concerns, the committee person will sometimes speak out at a council meeting and issue the concerns. So I just hope that those concerns get noted tonight. I do have a couple concerns. 10.3 is my main concern, where we talk about water variance, and then we also talk about wastewater variance. We've collected 487,000 more in water, and it's from my area. That is the biggest complaint I get, is the price of the water. And then I look and I say, we've got $500,000 that can go into reserves because we've over collected. I don't know how our forecasting can be off to be that high. And so I need to understand how the forecast can be off. I know it's new development, but $500,000 is a lot of money. And going into next year, and we're asking for money, you know, we always say let's have it at 3 point something other or 4% so that we can pay for the infrastructure, and then we get this from reserves. I can't do it next time for my residents. I will not increase the water bill that much. And the wastewater, we ended up with $188K. So if you take the two, we're at $700K over that we got from you know, collections. So it was really hard for me to look at that. I have a call with a resident tomorrow about this. They want to meet, you know, so I need to understand if this council likes collecting stuff and putting in reserves, or would you rather lower the amount that the taxpayer's going to pay, and that we realize that we're collecting enough for infrastructure, and that we do a proper study and we try to look at the rates for next year and reduce them.
Maybe Director Smith, you can speak to that, because I think we might be in the midst of something.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor McConkie. So with regards to revenues exceeding the budget, again, we put our best forecast forward, thinking when we think properties are going to be occupied, and we try to come up with an estimation of what the consumption is going to be. To be quite honest with you, a lot of the revenue is due to actually new water meters for new houses that are coming on board. And again, the projection was our projection was a lot lower than what actually physically happened. We had a lot more development in Stone Manor than what we thought was going to happen, as well as there was development in Snow Valley and other little pockets within the township that we didn't anticipate. Keep in mind, though, that those funds go into the reserve fund, water and/or wastewater reserve fund, and can only be used for water and/or wastewater services. So yes, it looks like we have an over-contribution, but we are walking down the path now. I'm actually just evaluating 2 proposals for a review of our water and wastewater rate study. When we do that study, which will likely start next month in June, and will be coming back to council in likely early fall, September, October, we will be taking into account, as part of that study, what is the current status of our reserves and reserve funds. And that is all taken into consideration, along with new development, and along with what we forecast the consumption to be, along with a number of other things, to determine what the rates should be. Should they increase? Should they decrease? At this time, I don't know until we've done that study. But we are in the midst of essentially awarding that to one of the consultants, and we will be commencing that in June. So again, we will be coming back in the fall to council with an information session on water and wastewater rates. One of the other things that you and I talked about is pricing of water. We have differences of opinion, I guess, as to whether the water is expensive or not. I'm not going to debate that. The wastewater, I think, based on some of the conversations I've had with some residents, wastewater is a concern. The tiered structure, tiered structure in the sense that the more water you use, the more you pay in wastewater, is something we're going to have to look at through this rate study, and that is something that I've mentioned to the consultants that we need to address, because it is a concern. Just because you're watering your lawn or you're washing your vehicle doesn't necessarily mean we're treating it. So there are other mechanisms that we need to take a look at. What those are today, you'll find out in September when we come back with some options.
Follow-up?
Well, follow-up to that is that just, I just ask council to respect that we do have a lot of money going into reserves, and that you consider the requests that we're receiving from the residents. And maybe I should have the residents write all of council when they're concerned about their water rates. My next question is Parks and Recreation. The special project events, they're overspent by $29K, and it was based on the Sports Heritage Hall and the Festival of Fort Willow. I understand that both of these are not really, I thought, and okay, I know the Festival for Fort Willow, I thought that we sort of chipped in. I think the last conversation I had at an economic development was that it sort of pays for itself, and there wouldn't be any, you know, it wouldn't cost the township this type of money except for staffing. The other one is the Sports Heritage Hall of Fame. I don't know how the funding works with that, but when I look at it and I see that we're overspent by $29K on 2 events like that, and we only put a certain amount away for volunteer appreciation, I have a hard thing to swallow this, whether we keep supporting these events at that, if we're going into debt like that. So I'd ask the Director of Finance to talk to that.
Or should it be Director Belcour or Director Schmidt? Director Belcour? Or no, Director Schmidt's going to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor McConkey. So interesting enough, this conversation came up with another councillor today. So keep in mind that what I'm providing is a variance compared from actual to budget. So it's not necessarily the overall event per se. So the Springwater Sports Heritage event does make money and actually does contribute money into a reserve. They did contribute about $1,200 this year into a reserve. So they were actually in the good. What I'd mentioned is that the budget, the line item budget under contracted services for Sports Heritage had a budget of 0, but the actuals were about $15,000, $16,000 more than the actual budget. It's more of a budget line item issue than it is total budget management, if you will. So hopefully I'm explaining that right. But essentially it's a line item budget variance is what I'm providing to you. I'm not providing, Sports Heritage in totality was in a positive, or That's not how this variance was actually provided for. I'm looking at revenues specifically, line item revenues, budget versus actual, and expense line item revenues, or expenses, actuals to budget. So I'm not looking at the overall cost center, if you will, when I provide this variance analysis. So hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity.
Okay, follow up, and then I'll go.
So do I assume from what you're saying is that the sports heritage, it did not cost the municipality any money, it made revenue? And do I assume that, what do I assume with the Festival of Fort Willow?
Director Schmidt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. A little bit different in that, yes, we did have additional expenditures that were approved. So again, we have to record the expenditures on the expense side, and then we also have offsetting revenues. So there were some offsetting revenues. I believe some of the revenue from the County of Simcoe's Economic Development Fund, or grant that we got in 2016, was actually offset some of those expenses as well. So the Festival of Fort Willow and the Springwater Heritage Sports Heritage event did not cost the township money.
Okay, Councillor Coghlan, then Austin, then I think Alan had his hand up.
Thank you. This is my closing, I guess it is. I just want it noted that when this happens again next year, I would like to see a working session, much like we do with the budget, a special meeting of council if we have to add one more to the monthly schedule. This is something that I think that we all have a diligent, and as a councillor to my left will often say that this is the most important thing, is people's money. And if a resident was to look at this, it either looks like we overtaxed them or we provided underservice, and we need to explain what these numbers are. And it takes me a lot longer, apparently, for it to make sense to me, because I have to feel confident in my ability to vote on this allocation this evening. So I just feel like getting it on a Thursday night and voting on it on a Wednesday, I mean, I could have I did sit in your office for more than maybe, but I think that having a working session and allowing us to really fully understand it, that is what I would like moving forward. And then my only other concern is that the 10.5. So I don't know if I have to pull that to amend it, or if what we would like done there.
I think if you want to amend it, let's pull that one. So 10.5 we are pulling. Comments, okay. Okay, no, okay, I'll carry on. Councillor Austin?
Simply with respect to 10.7, the allocation of 2016 Springwater net proceeds, I just wanted to point out, because I spoke to Director Schmidt today. Currently, there's a balance of $2,340 from the 2015 tournament in the Community Assistance Program Fund. And if we add another $5,000 from 2016, we will then have that $7,234 in the Community Assistance Program Fund. And I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the other two members on the committee. So we will have $7,000 in total to work with for the rest of this year if this is approved.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Allen?
No, I was just responding to any questions that were posed.
Okay, so the Councillor Austin, or Councillor Coghlan.
And also the 10.7 to $5,000 to volunteer appreciation. Is that to be, we increased it this year already. Is that to be strictly Springwater volunteer, or is this fire volunteer, or what is this a volunteer appreciation? What is the parameters of that 5,000?
I'm not sure if I'll go to Director Schmidt for this, but I think, we do kind of recognize the fire services, in a special way. And I know we contribute to it, but I'm not sure as part of this, but I'll go to Director Schmidt for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Councillor Coghlan. This is actually one of the amended motions from the committee, so If I get this wrong, then I'll pass it over to the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. But I think the intent is that, yes, we did bump up volunteer appreciation funds, if you will, in the budget for 2017 to, I believe it's around $3,500. I think the intent is that through the discussion as Finance and Audit Committee is that wanted a little more elaborate, if you will, celebration of our volunteers, in that, $3,500 may not be enough to actually provide for a celebration and provide for the recognition that really they deserve. So whether or not that is for firefighters as well, I would have to leave that to the chair and or Councillor Hanna, but I don't believe that was the intent, but I stand to be corrected.
I think Councillor Hanna had it first, and then Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you. It's just that we all recognize how hard it is to get volunteers and how we couldn't afford to do the things if we had to pay the people, so we need the volunteers. My understanding of my position on this here is that I would like to see, this is outside the fire service. I would like us to see us do something significant and not just have, as I always jokingly say, have folks here and give them a cookie when they leave. I would like to give them something significant to recognize their services. A township golf shirt, township hat, and a nice reasonable banquet dinner. We may not spend the whole $5,000, but at least if we have it in there, it gives us an opportunity, and if we don't spend it all, I'm sure we'll find something else for it. So I strongly hope that the rest of this council supports doing something to show appreciation for our volunteers so we can actually get more.
Deputy Mayor Allen, and then Councillor Coghlan.
Yes, I reiterate what Councillor Hanna said. So we discussed that it was towards volunteer appreciation. So to have a more wholesome event for volunteer appreciation, other than the fire, which is emergency services, which is handled in another event. But we wanted to use these excess funds and split them up between CAP, volunteers, and then have some seed money for this year's Springwater Swing instead of having to dip into another reserve. So that was the reasoning.
Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you. So then that we would have $8,500 for an event is what this is suggesting then. Okay. The other question I had was when it says that in the remaining balance, what is the remaining balance?
Director Schmidt?
It's approximately $3,000.
Okay, so can we accept everything except for item 10.5? So moved by Ritchie, second by Coghlan. The recommendations from the Finance and Audit Committee contained in items 10.2 through to 10.8 be approved as presented, with the exception of item 10.5 to be introduced separately. All those in favor? Carried. So let's go to 10.5. And I guess, Councillor Coghlan, you can, sorry, I actually have to have it on the table. Okay, so the steps are we need a mover and a seconder as it's presented, and then we can move for an amendment. So I need a mover and seconder. Okay, Austin Coghlan. So with that, Councillor Coghlan.
Perfect, thank you. Through you, Mayor French, this may be to Director Belcourt. Surprise. I forget the word, hang on, sorry. The cost sharing, the community capital cost sharing policy and the Community Recreation Association operations. I too am behind this 100%. I think this is a great thing that we're doing. I was fine with the motion, with the process and the speed that it was going along. I haven't received any pushback from either Minising or Orient Mills to get it done faster. I think that they've really appreciated being involved in the process and having say up to this point. I'm curious if we bring forward, I mean, we have it here in Appendix B and C, available to us now. So by bringing it forward on June 7th, what would our next step be from that?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Coghlan. The intent would be to bring it to formally table the draft policies before council. Received any comments, suggestions for it to be modified, etc. Or if council is satisfied with the draft policies, then we can move forward with the implementation.
Follow up?
And by bringing it forward on June 7th, does that change the process at all? We're not excluding any resident input or any hall board input, like we're not fast tracking and therefore skipping another collective meeting?
Director Belcourt?
Thank you, Worship. I don't believe so. There's been substantial consultation going back through the Recreation Master Plan update. You know, there were special sessions with the community hall boards. We had, since the end of that process, we've had numerous meetings with the hall boards, and we've been constantly discussing and how we would like to move forward. And this is the draft product from all those discussions, and finally moving it forward to put it in place.
Follow up?
And so will Appendix B and C appear any different on June 7th?
Director Belcourt?
The versions that are attached were the ones provided to RAC. There are some minor adjustments based on comments received that evening from the hall boards and RAC. So they will be slightly different, but in general, they'll basically be the same.
Okay, I'll go to Deputy Mayor Allen, and then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mayor French. My understanding, well, first of all, I have had questions from the hall boards about the process. They've appreciated the process, but you know, they're looking forward to answers and to new policy. And so the reason for putting the June 7th was to try to get some finality before summer break, so that the hall boards, after their meeting and their input that they've had, would be able to understand how the processes are going to change going forward. My understanding as well was that in addition to what is there now with respect to the reports and the draft policy, there would be some numbers, some projected numbers with respect to if there is assumption of certain operating expenses by the township, that, you know, what that would look like, what that would involve. So I would hope to see that as well as what's there now before we can make a final decision on June 7th.
Okay, duly noted. Okay, Councillor Coghlan, then Councillor McConkey.
Sir, and then back to the first paragraph with regards to the plans that need to be developed to end and deal with Anton Mills and Elmvale. And I'm just curious what the plan is, like if we're going to be, what is going to be different for Anton Mills and Elmvale than would be reflective of the rest of the hall boards.
Any comment? Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, or through you to Councillor Coghlan. Again, I think that's something that is not going to happen overnight. I think the idea is that as you see in the financials, and specifically the financials, is there are some concerns with those two particular halls in that they are in a deficit and continue to run a deficit. And to be quite honest with you, that's not the only driving factor, but one of the driving factors as to why we are transitioning the way we are, is that, you know, at the end of the day, these deficits, they're going to potentially continue to grow. And if they do, we need to take control of them. And by having them in the hall board's area of responsibility, we don't necessarily have as much control. So the idea is, let's take them over. Let's have a conversation about what can we do potentially different to either soften the blow, or does the township end up taking the hit for those? And that may be all different alternatives that we'll have to come back to council with, and decisions will have to be made.
Follow up?
And thank you. And again, they're not going to be easy decisions. I mean, the renovations that are happening within other hall boards. And my concern is, though, that the intent of this policy was to provide, we've talked about equal and fair. So my concern is with Elmvale and Anton Mills addressed here, what is going to be different? We're developing a policy to address the losses and deficits of hall boards. So why is it, yeah, we're in the red, but I like, there's only so many Easter egg hunts I can organize. So, I mean, it's going to be, that this policy is put in place for that. So I don't understand why the first paragraph is needed at all.
Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Coghlan. Again, I think it's, not speaking on behalf of the committee, but I think the idea was, again, from a financial perspective, they jump off the page in that they're in deficits. And so I think committee's thoughts were, I guess, or recommendation was, is how are we going to deal with these? We know that there are some concerns here, so how are we going to deal with them? Are we going to deal with them by June 7th? Probably not. But we're starting to transition where we are taking over the operation of those facilities, of all facilities, taking over all the bookings, and then we really need to start looking at all of our facilities, and maybe more specifically those two, because they are in the red, and what do we need to change in order to, again, turn the ship around, if you will, and or are there other things that we, again, potential tough decisions that may need to be made? I can't provide that information to you at this stage. We can provide you some recommendations once we do a little bit more analysis, but at the end of the day, we'll have to come back to council and decisions, again, will have to be made.
Last one. So, and I appreciate that, like, I'll reiterate again that my concern is that this whole plan, this whole policy, and this cost sharing was to be developed to address the needs, the individual needs of each hall board. So my only concern is that it says that we need to develop a plan. So I just didn't know if the plan was additional to what we're doing, like if there's going to be something else required of staff or something else required of these two hall boards that's not going to be required of the rest of the hall boards, if that makes sense. Because they're highlighted here and it says that we need, it is the opinion that plans need to be developed to and deal with these, that makes me feel like it's a side or in addition to that the appendix provided.
Director Schmidt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Coghlan. In my opinion, I believe it's all part and parcel of how we're going to transition our community halls. What the plan is for Ant Mills versus what the plan is for Elmville, what the plan is for Hillsdale, what the plan is for Phelpston, may all be somewhat different. And so, does that mean we're treating them unfairly? No, but we do need to take a look at each of those halls and determine what is, I think, a minimum level of service that we should be providing to those communities, and at what level of subsidy is the township willing to provide those. Again, it's all part and parcel of us transitioning this whole process of taking over the community halls. There may be different plans for each community hall because each community hall has different amenities or services that they provide. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Councillor McConkey.
Well, I'm beginning to wonder now for 10.5 if it's really, all we really should be dealing with in this when we group it together, that the information report for the hall board year-end results. Because, making recommendations how we're going to deal with stuff in 2017, that could go back to wastewater. We should have maybe expanded that motion to say that we'd be looking at rates and stuff. So it's a little more detailed, and it really isn't what the result of the end of tonight. You want us to sort of sign off to say that we agree with the financials of the 2016. So that's one comment. But what I do have is, since it's coming forward on June 7th, I would really like a timeline to show what were the meetings that were held prior and who were the stakeholders that attended those meetings. And if there was any gaps of the stakeholders that didn't attend, then I think we also have to show in that report what are our next steps as a result. And if we show the next steps and there was a stakeholder that should have been advised before, how are we going to communicate to them this new policy? Because I understand that not all stakeholders were at present reviewing these policies, and so it may be something new to them. So we really clearly have to understand who's accountable and how that's going to get to all of the hall boards. I don't believe there was anyone from Elmvale at the meeting, and I don't believe there was anyone from Grenfell at the meeting, if I understand correctly. So, you know, we have to understand how that's going to be communicated to them.
Yes, I think there was. Councillor Hannan and then Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just from some of the dialogue that we've heard, my support from June 7th is that the sooner we get a policy that indicates what the township is going to pay to assist community halls, then the sooner that the halls raise funds for their fundraising programs, they get to keep more of that money and don't have to pay 100% of the hydro and the heat and the air conditioning, all that sort of thing. So that's why I support June the 7th, because I think that's advantageous for the halls in that respect. And I think the two halls that are mentioned here are mentioned because they're in financial difficulty. And we're not trying to point any hall out, in my view. We're trying to come up with a way saying these halls need some kind of assistance. If we get the township taking over to help assist, what costs we may be able to divert that would help them. But I do say that there is an onus on the Finance Audit Committee, if not this whole council, when we see that there's a financial problem, that we have to come up with a policy to deal with it. And that's why we put this forward. And I think it's not what I may not agree with our Director of Finance. I don't think it's something that we're trying to say we've got to do each hall individually. In some respects we may, but I think it's just in a collective policy we need to develop and how we're going to run the halls, and when we see deficits, how we're going to manage them. That's sort of how I see this. I don't see this as necessarily a recommendation on what we're going to do. It's just pointing out that there is a problem and we need to address it, and there's an onus on us to do that.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor French. I concur with what Councillor Hanna, this point I was going to make. It's incumbent upon the Finance and Audit Committee to look at this, and when there are financial issues or problems, to bring them to the attention of council. And that's what we did with this motion. So it's not just the red balances at the closing balance on that, but it's also taking a look at the relationship of the expenditures to the revenue. So if you look at the expenditures in Anton Mills and Elmvale for the year and relate them to the revenues, there's quite a difference. And so it's a trend that we're looking at that says this has to be adjusted. There's got to be more revenue, and there's got to be control of the expenses. Otherwise, the red number on the close is just going to grow and grow and grow. So it's part of this policy we're going to be bringing in, but it's also a wake-up call saying, you've got to generate revenue in relationship to your expenses so that the situation doesn't continue to deteriorate. And that's what the committee was trying to communicate to council.
Okay, I think we've had really, really good discussion on that. I mean, I want to make an overall comment. On all these reports, and I know we've accepted most of them, you know, I think they were very well done. I give credit to the Finance Department and the kind of Finance and Audit Committee, because all the answers I went looking for, they were there. And some things, you know, are a little scary, but the reality is we do have an obligation to assist whenever possible. Yes, we've kind of made a statement that we want to retain the local halls in that. Well, we may have to come up with a methodology to make them work, because if we're pulling dollars out of taxpayers to subsidize something that we like the idea of continuing, but it's for some reason not being well utilized or has no income, yeah, we'll probably have to look at it. It's as simple as that. That's our responsibility. So with that, I think we've had good discussion. Councillor Coghlan.
And now understanding that there is no additional, there's nothing added, so this is within the plan that's there, I don't need to amend it. I'm fine with it.
Okay. So with that, move by Austin, second by Coghlan. Item 10.5 be approved as presented. All those in favor? Carried. Really good discussion. Thank you. And now we'll move on to correspondence items. I need someone to give a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor. Hannah? Seconder? Alan? Okay. Any of those you would like to pull for further discussion? And I know Councillor Coghlan mentioned before at the beginning of the meeting, she might have to leave around 10 to 9, so she's late. So anyway, definitely excused. Anything you want to pull here? Okay, seeing none, moved by Hannah, second by Alan. The correspondence and information items 11.2 through 11.5 be received as information. All those in favor? Carried. And action reports has been asked, we move up 12.9 and deal with it first. The group benefits program, because we still have Aaron sitting there patiently to address this. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Basically, I'll read the resolution so you know what you might be moving. That the report from the Human Resource and Strategic Coordinator regarding Group Benefits Program renewal dated May 17, 2017 be received. That the Township renews this group benefit program with Sun Life Financial through the LAS Consortium plan effective June 1st, 2017. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Austin and Hannah. Okay, with that, maybe you can give us a quick overview, Aaron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just so last year, about July 1st, we switched to the LAS Consortium plan with Sun Life being the underwriters for that program. We did receive cost savings then. However, at renewal, they've looked at our claims history, and specifically it is our prescription drug costs and our dental costs that are driving up the premium. Our Director of Finance has looked at the budget and has determined that the premium costs that they're proposing can be accommodated through the budget.
Okay, questions on the plan? Or actually, Councillor Hannah.
Just quickly, if I may, because you sat here all night, I got to ask you a question. I guess it was consistent with what percentage the employee would pay. Like, I know some plans you pay 50%, 80%, or 90%, depending on what government's in power, I guess. But so what percentage would our employees pay, for example, for drugs?
Aaron?
To Councillor Hannah, through Your Worship, we pay, the township pays actually 100% of the premiums for drug costs. We do have certain there's a $2 per prescription deductible through that, as well as there is a limit on the dispensing fee, but it is 100% employer paid premiums.
Okay, I guess I was thinking if we could reduce the costs, for example, if we weren't paying the 100%, but I didn't understand it. We pay 100%, but when the employee goes to get the drugs, they may only get compensated for, say, 90% of it. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hannah, yes, we could look at implementing those types of changes. However, I would just caution that employee group plans are considered part of your total compensation package, and any significant change to an employee benefit plan could be considered, because compensation is a fundamental term of employees' employment, so any significant changes could have significant repercussions to an employee. So that's, I would just caution. We can look at those and bring options back, but benefits are considered part of the total compensation, and any changes to the benefit plan would have to be proceeded with caution.
Thank you.
C.O. Brindley, you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor French. Something I want to mention, and I could have the stats off, but I don't think we've had an increase in 5 years. This is the first time we've been tweaking the plan and adjusting it every year. We had lots of challenges with increases prior to that time, but this is the first time we've actually seen an increase in 5 years.
Aaron, you have another comment?
Another comment was brought forward from our broker. The province has proposed, and I saw it did pass in the budget, the free prescriptions for those under the age of 24. They're anticipating that there might be a 5 to 7% cost and reductions to premiums. They just don't know at this point until they have more details on that and can evaluate the costing. So there might be opportunities to reduce those prescription drug costs in the future.
Thank you. Councillor McConkey.
I just don't know if this council is aware, if it happened through this council. I don't believe so, but I know we did have rising costs before, and we looked at the different plans, and the latest plan too had to be changed, and there was benefits that were changed, sort of reduced, and that. So at this point, I would recommend that we stay for a while and let's settle the dust and that, because we did do a big changeover in that. So if we can sort of stay with this for a while, I'd appreciate it.
Any other questions? I have a question. Since we're talking about benefit programs, and there's probably just a few of us, maybe only 2 of us, you know, I realized I got a nice letter last February saying, Mr. French, your benefits expire May 26, which happened to be my 70th birthday. Now, there's many municipalities around that have coverage, some of them up to 85. Has there been any consideration or any thought of increasing the benefit age, or is it even available in a program like this?
Our broker has advised that it is something we probably shouldn't consider, but if it was a direction of council, we could go back and get the costing on that, because there would be additional costs to the program.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McConkey?
Could we also maybe look at what it does cost to have the benefits, so that maybe those that are, if our insurance company isn't recommending, that maybe we give a certain allotment of money towards those that are, you know, are not covered under the plan, that are, you know, not within the age of the plan, so that we can, they get some type of compensation, so that's sort of more equal.
Yeah, I just want to challenge, you know, the councillor on decorum, you know, 70, old, you know. Councillor Hanna.
No, further to that, though, I'm not sure. I'll say Meaford because I think it was Meaford, but one of their municipalities, everybody on council was over the age of 70, so the municipality had to pay them all. I think the councilor told me it was $2,000 each for a medical plan. So I'm just throwing that out there, not saying we want the $2,000, just so you know what it'll cost.
Yeah, no, and quite honestly, I think for next year, I think we should be looking at surrounding municipalities, you know, because I know Toss Agila, they have a plan that goes forever, but CAO Brindley?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, Agila Toss is having that plan removed as we speak, so they are coming down and they're removing that plan.
Okay, any other questions on the plan? Okay, so.
Mayor French, this might be a time for a raise for us councilors there to cover some of these costs. And I'm thinking of you there, being you're hitting the big 7-0 here, so.
No, I'm a little past it, unfortunately. Okay, moved by Austin, second by Hannah, that the report from the Human Resources and Strategic Coordinator regarding Group Benefits Program renewal dated May 17, 2017 be received. The township renews this group benefit program with Sun Life Financial through the LAS Consortium Plan effective June 1st, 2017. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, we'll go back to the beginning, 12.1, and this is report on to order a public meeting. So if I can have a mover and a seconder. Okay, Hannah and McConkey. So again, we're just asking to schedule a public meeting. If you want to pose some questions of Director Plan, you can, but we will be dealing with that at the public meeting. Okay, seeing no questions, moved by Hannah, second McConkey, the report from the planner regarding ZB-2017-004, Christopher Kemp, on behalf of Jay Stefano, dated May 17, 2017, be received, and that a public meeting be scheduled in accordance with the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13, as amended, to gain public input on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, that subject to the comments received, that the bylaw be approved subsequent to the public meeting by council. All those in favor? Carried. And again, another public meeting to be scheduled, so if I have a mover and a seconder. Alan, Hannah? Again, same thing, unless you have some questions. Councillor McConkey?
On 12.2, prior to it coming to public meeting or sometime when it does come back to council, I would like to ensure that fire has looked at it and provided any comment, as well as bylaw, because I see that the increasing the number and that, and I just don't know what it would have as to the impact for bylaw and who looks after when the noise complaints and that type of thing happens. So need better understanding and with fire. Safety is my main concern.
So, Director Spangler, do you have any initial comment on that?
Thank you, Mayor French, through you to Councillor McConkey. As a general technical matter, staff circulates these applications to all of senior staff to obtain comments with respect to emergency services and things of that nature. That will happen in this event. And in addition, there's also technical meetings that we also have to go over certain issues that might come about as part of any development that comes before council.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moved by Alan, second by Hannah, the report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Austin.
Yes, I just wanted to share with the rest of the council, because I asked some questions of Planner Russell, who's not here tonight, and I asked him some questions about this, and he says that it's still early in the review process, but his understanding was that the proposal is that the trailers in that park would remain on site for the full year, but the park would be closed for 95 days a year. So it talks about, it's only a 3-season park. Residents would not be permitted to stay on the property for more than 270 days a year. Because I know the Wasaga Sands trailer park, over the years, there have been concerns about a lot of residents living there year-round, and also adding on to them, their buildings. And there have been bylaw enforcement issues in the past with respect to Wasaga Pines. That's it, Wasaga Pines facility not shutting down completely. I also asked if the facilities at the Splash Canyon Park would be reopened, and he said that those facilities, like the water slides and all that, would be removed completely. So I just wanted to share that information with the rest of council.
And keep those thoughts for the public meeting also, because those are comments that are appropriate. Okay, moved by Alan, second by Hannah, that the report from the planner regarding application ZB-2017-005 dated May 17, 2017 be received, and that a public meeting be scheduled in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, another public meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor? Okay, Hannah? Alan? People's arms are getting tired, I think. Okay, any initial comments or questions on this? Okay, moved by Hannah, second by Alan, that the report from the planner regarding ZB-2017-008, Catherine and Norman, Terrio, okay, dated May 17, 2017 be received, that a public meeting be scheduled in accordance with Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended to gain public input on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and that subject to the comments received, that the bylaw be approved subsequent to the public meeting by council. All those in favor? Carried. Now we're moving on to kind of some comments and second suites under the Planning Act, and want to provide some direction. So can I have a mover and a seconder? Hannah and McConkey. Just so you know what the resolution will read, that the report from planner regarding new regulations suites under the Planning Act, RSO 1990, dated May 17, 2000, be received, and that staff be directed to prepare and submit township staff and council comments regarding the proposed regulation in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing on or before June 5th, 2017. So I guess we invite comments. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. I thought staff had some good comments, and I would just like to suggest that maybe consider adding that there be adequate off-road parking or off-street parking. If you go back to, you think back a couple years ago where we had some talk about community housing, and again, I argued at that time that if you're going to approve community housing in subdivision area, there should be adequate off-street parking, and not everybody agreed with me, but I think it's important for the residents who live on that same street is where these rental properties will take place, or in-law suites, whatever, that there be adequate off-street parking to compensate the other people who live on the street. The other thing I would suggest that maybe consider adding as well, because we can't enforce the owner to be an occupier of that resident. It could be a rental property where the in-laws live in the basement or vice versa or whatever, that we have better, or if you like, we consider having better or more enforceable property standards, because rental properties don't always get maintained the same level as they are when the owner occupies them. I think you know what I'm trying to say, so those 2 points I'd like you to consider adding to your excellent recommendations.
Other comments? Okay, thank you. So I don't think I need to read the resolution. Oh, Councillor Hanna.
Sorry, I missed one because the fire chief was here. Also, I'm not sure how it works for rental properties. I know apartments, you got to have sprinkler systems, but I would suggest that maybe one of the other things we consider should be some minimum commitment or requirement, I should say, for smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in these suites as well.
Maybe I can go to either our building officer or our chief and just comment what is in place right now, regardless of what the apartment or building is. If you want to just make a general comment, don't fight over it. And actually, since Mr. Hippolito is coming forward, you may want to also comment on something you shared about also demanding certain things that are not, necessarily under the code, that gets municipalities in trouble. So you may want to just touch on that also.
Thank you, Mayor French. To Councillor Hanna. Currently, so the requirements there, if you have a secondary suite that you are creating, and we're not talking about in-law suites, but we're talking about actually a rentable unit, per se. The building code prescribes certain requirements, and they include separation, so fire separations between the actual units, exit requirements, as well as fire detector and smoke detector requirements. So those are prescribed in the code. In the case of fire or sprinklers on them, I know there has been some communication, and I'm saying this because I had a conversation with City of Barrie, who deals with quite a significant amount of them regarding the sprinklers. The one concern that might come up is the fact of it may be cost prohibitive in certain cases. However, always a great idea. To the point of Mayor French, the reference asking more than what's in the code, yes, it could get the municipality in some hot water. And in the case that we heard of this week, that's exactly what happened. It was actually the City of Toronto who was asking for a little bit more than what is prescribed in the code. And there is a little bit of, there's an actual legal opinion, as well as some pushback from some of the community interest, I guess, if you want to call it that. So the code does provide some significant requirements there for secondary suites already to deal with life and safety.
Follow up?
Thank you. I know, but this is a request for suggestions into the revised statutes of Ontario, the RSOs, for them to change the regulations. And I would suggest that it, consistent with what you're saying, but if we're going to make any suggestions how they should change the law, that would be the time maybe to do it. And the other thing I missed out on was suggesting maybe a total or a maximum number of people that could live in a resident per square feet. Only because I know of some people that looked at a place that was for sale in Barrie, and when they went to the living room, it was all boarded off with doors and everything. Every room except the kitchen was a bedroom. So I'm not sure we can control that, but again, they're asking for recommendations into the law they want to create, and this is our opportunity to do it. That's just all I say. Thank you.
No, I think, Councillor Hannon, you have a very good point. We are just providing input. They can reject them. So, yeah, whatever comments we have, we should duly note it. Any other comments on this? Councillor McConkey.
When it talks about the one parking space, and I'm assuming it's for a car and that, like, but when we get into Springwater and people want their ATVs and their snowmobiles and their trailers, do we have to look at that to sort of clarify that? I know we have our own bylaw, but I just want to make sure that how we would handle that.
Director Spagno?
Through Mayor French to Councillor McConkey. The staff recommendation is that any parking requirements be considered at the local level. The one key point is that it says a maximum of one parking spot will be required. So my suggestion would be that if we're looking at a broad-based zoning bylaw in order to look at second suites, the parking consideration for even recreational vehicles and things of that nature would have to go through as part of that process.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, moved by Hannah, second to McConkey, that the report from the planner regarding new regulations for second suites under the Planning Act, RSO 1990, dated May 17, 2017, be received. Staff be directed to prepare and submit township staff and council comments regarding the proposed regulations of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing on or before June 5th, 2017. All those in favor? Carried. Just a follow-up question that, when we see now in resolutions, is it, do we have two ministries now, Municipal Affairs and Housing, or is it still under one umbrella? Madam Clerk? All right, duly noted. Okay, I think I got all them fairs. Pardon? Apparently our resolution is correct. I thought they had separated them, but the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So, thank you. Okay, moving on to the next action item. And of course, this is the Gallo subdivision in Elmville. And we're talking about executing, amending model home agreement. And it's in the report and that, so we can have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Austin, Deputy Mayor Allen. And maybe comment from Director Spagno?
Thank you, Mayor French. The purpose of the report is to allow the developer to have an additional 4 model homes on the property. The report before council is just to get authorization for the mayor and the clerk to execute the agreement so that the developer can be tied to the submission of securities in the event that those model homes have to be removed, and all of the standards under all the municipal standards.
Thank you. Any questions on that? All those in favor? Carried. Now we're moving on to approval and purchase of software. And can I have a mover and a seconder to put it on the floor? Alan, Hannah. And of course, we're talking about budget software. Maybe I'll just have a quick overview from Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Simply, staff's looking to move forward with an item that was discussed during our 2017 budget to purchase budget software to assist in the delivery and preparation of our annual budgets. As mentioned in the report, through the current provider, they're offering approximately a 50% discount. And so that discount expires at the end of June. So the staff is looking forward to purchasing it and moving forward with implementation later this year. It likely will not be implemented for, well, I shouldn't say likely, it will not be implemented for 2018 budget, but for 2019 would be the intent.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay. Oh, Councillor Austin?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I asked Director Schmidt the $2,500 per year operating costs of it. Would that be offset by the amount of efficiencies, reduction in staff time because they have a better system? And he said chances are it would probably pay for itself in that way, so that it would be less staff time preparing all the budget and other financial things. So it would be cost saving in the long run.
And what you say, Director Schmidt, do you concur?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Austin's comments. Yes, the comment was that we haven't actually done the full analysis of whether or not it would be a direct offset, but definitely there would be efficiencies in staff time, having to deal with complex Excel spreadsheets and links and so on and so forth can be frustrating. So there definitely will be savings. I can't tell you that it's going to be a direct 2,500 offset, but there definitely will be savings.
Thank you. Yeah. Moved by Alan, second by Hannah, that the report from the Director of Finance regarding budget software purchase date May 17, 2017 be received. The staff be authorized to purchase the Questica budget software in the amount of $34,960 plus HST. The Mayor and Director of Finance be authorized to execute the necessary agreements and documents. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, the next item is obviously on ATV trails, and that, can I have a mover and a seconder and get her on the table? Richie and Alan. Director Belcourt.
Thank you, Your Worship. As noted in the report, Council did approve extension of the COATV trail system back in the February 15th meeting of Council, and it was to amend the existing agreement. Upon proceeding to amend the agreement, we realized that the existing agreement had expired. Therefore, we need to enact a new agreement, and therefore we require Council's approval to do so.
Okay, any questions? Okay, moved by Richie, second by Alan. The report from the Director of Recreation, Parks and Properties regarding the Central Ontario ATV Club Agreement dated May 17, 2017 be received. That Council supports an agreement between the Township of Springwater and the Central Ontario ATV Club for the use of the trail routes as depicted in the subject report for a period of 1 year, and that the Township's duly authorized signing officers execute the necessary documents. All those in favor? Carried. And now we're moving on to information reports, and there's a number of them, but to get it on the table, can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Hannah, Deputy Mayor Allen. Okay, is there any of these reports you'd like to discuss or comment on? Okay. Moved by Hannah, second Allen, the reports, items 13.2 through to 13.7 be received as information. All those in favor? Carried. Verbal reports. Official plan update. I'm sure it'll be brief, Director Spagno.
Thank you, Mayor French. Just to reiterate that staff is still working on the growth management strategy, the draft that was submitted, try and iron out some details with respect to that. The one piece of information I'd like to note is I've been hearing rumblings that the growth amendment, so the updated growth amendment, will be released most likely in the next couple of weeks to a month. That could have an implication on the timing of the growth management strategy, depending on the details within that document. So I'd just like to inform council that that's something that we're waiting to see be released by the ministry.
Okay. CO Bentley, do you want to give any update on economic development?
Mayor French and Council, I think we're at a point that the next meeting will see the actual request for proposal, a draft request for proposal for our marketing plan, essentially what we're calling a general awareness plan. And maybe I can refer it to our Director of Planning if there's, I think that's the main thing on the agenda. Yeah, so it's, we've got, as you've probably seen, the flags are up. We've got booths. You've seen those at the at all the festivals we're attending now. So we have a lot of the what I call infrastructure, a lot of this economic development infrastructure, and now as detailed in our work plan that was presented to council last year, we're now getting into finalizing the RFP. But I also want to mention we do have a summer staff now which is working on our business directory, and essentially it's a web-based business directory. So those businesses that currently may not even have web presence, by doing this exercise, they're going to have web presence. So.
Thank you. Canada 150 celebrations. Shall I go to Director Belcour, or please?
Thank you, Worship. The planning for the Celebrate Springwater Canada 150 celebrations are moving along quite nicely. I believe we have the contract now for the Headliner Act and the Opening Act, plus the children's performers. We're still sourcing out other various vendors, et cetera, for the day, and then following up on another number of options suggested at our last committee meeting. But all in all, things are progressing quite nicely, and just praying for good weather.
Councillor Austin?
Through you, Mayor French. Do you said that you have a headliner, musical headliner lined up. How are you for musicians throughout the day? You said you had children's performers, but what about, do you have a full slate of musicians for the day? Yes?
Director Belcour?
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Austin. Yes, we do have the children's performers. We do have an opening act and then the headliner act.
So you don't need any more performers, is that what you're saying?
I don't believe so at this point.
C.O. Brindley?
Your Worship, I just wanted to mention that I'm not sure in this format we've announced that our media partner is, and forgive me, I don't listen to country, I apologize, but Kix FM and the Doc are our media partners on this, which will cover extensive media announcements in advance, as well as be here that day. Big splash. So it's actually, it's all coming together. And I don't just have the signed agreement yet, but I guess Director Belcour and I will probably by tomorrow be able to share a finite information with this council, and actually news releases will go out.
Good. Any other comments? Okay. County updates. Deputy Mayor Allen, do you want to make any comments, or just the ERRC?
Strategic planning session coming.
Yeah, I guess the strategic planning session, as Deputy Mayor Allen, is coming up. But also, of course, at the last county meeting, we did have the public meeting on the Environmental Resource and Recovery Center. And there'll be something coming to County Council for approval of it at some point. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. Not necessarily a question, just feedback. The Simcoe County, in their wisdom, generated a nice, colorful document about waste and the possibilities of what may happen with garbage pickup in Springwater. And some of the feedback I got was questions about the bi-weekly, because in Springwater, most residents keep their garbage inside in the garage, and the stink in the summertime would be pretty bad. So if you have to go to bi-weekly, they're asking if it could be bi-weekly in winter only, and in the summertime weekly, if you would at least consider that in your discussions. And the other, of course, concern was that if you don't put out a green bin, they don't pick out your garbage. Some people only put out green bins apparently once every couple of weeks, just for your information.
All I can say, there has been some discussion on, of course, the green bin and that, and I think there'll be a resolution. They're doing, and actually going through an auditing exercise this year to find out who is putting it out, and if they're not, why. And so, you know, I think the hard enforcement approach will be softened as we move or transition through this exercise.
And if I may, the other concern about the bi-weekly is that the possibilities it'll generate more littering, which will be a greater cost for our municipality having to pick up the garbage like some other municipalities are doing right now.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
In response to Councillor Hanna's concern about the people not putting their green bins out and therefore the garbage not being collected, I received a question like that, to that extent, from one of my residents. So I phoned the county, and they said, no. They are just telling people that, you know, encouraging people, please put your green bin out. It doesn't mean that they won't pick up the garbage if your green bin isn't out. That's the clarification that I got.
I understand that, Councillor Austin, but I'm just saying this is one of the suggestions that was in the county council brochure that they mailed out to the residents in Springwater.
No, and as a matter of fact, I think that was obviously the initial approach, but through council discussion, there's more emphasis on education rather than enforcement, especially in the initial time period. But I think your comments are worthwhile and will be passed on to the appropriate people at the county. Any other questions about county and what's happening or whatever? Okay. How about some municipal updates? Anybody want to? Councillor McConkey.
The Heritage had their old ways to new ways last night. It was a great presentation. It was sort of an interactive presentation where there was objects or things that you cooked with and that, and the audience would try to guess as to what the utensil or the tool was from the days. Some of them were dating back into the 1800s, so it was quite an interesting night. And I have to thank the Heritage team and Karen Way and Alyssa McGinnis and the staff. Everybody participated to put it on. So thank you for all of those that contributed, and thank you for everybody who came out. First Canada 150 event.
No, and it was well attended. Councillor Hanna.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention again the Midhurst Soapbox Derby, which is on June the 17th. The original age group was going to be 8 to 13. Now it's been expanded up to 16. So if you're 15 and 11 and a half months, you can put your card in.
Councillor Austin.
I just wanted to ask Chief Gavet if how the Alarm for Life campaign is going. Have you received? Have all the visits to homes been completed, and are you getting very many alarms handed in for the competition to find the oldest?
Chief Gavet.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Austin, Alarm for Life is doing well, as it does every year, through the participation of our firefighters and the associations. It's not over yet by any stretch. Quite excited to be seeing, and a little concerned also, at the age of some of the detectors that are being handed in. But, you know, at the end of the day, at least they're being handed in, and homeowners are getting themselves new alarms which are going to protect themselves and their families. So we're very encouraged at this point.
Any other comments? Well, I think we should make a comment that and I touched on it earlier when the Elmville High School students are here, but the presentation we sponsored with Doug Griffith, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, was well attended in Wasaga Beach. And of course, it was an effort put forward by Springwater, Clearview, and Wasaga Beach. And we thank Wasaga Beach for hosting it at the Recplex, but it was a well-done presentation, humorous, but some obviously made you squirm in your chair, a few of the points that they were making, but it was well done. Any other municipal updates? Okay. Well, I guess I should mention, I think there's a couple tickets on June 4th, not very many. None? Okay. I'm not gonna, okay. Sold out. Anyway, the tea that's being sponsored here, June 4th, has been sold out. So it's 2 to 4. So I won't say any more on that then. Okay, any other comments or updates from councilors? Okay, motion, which notice was given, and of course, there's a note here, the notice of motion submitted by Councillor Austin, the May 3rd meeting regarding support of the Greenbelt expansion has been withdrawn. Councillor Austin?
I just wanted to comment or provide an explanation. Basically, I haven't abandoned the idea. I just want more time to hear and study all aspects of the issue. I felt that I was premature, having heard only the presentation by the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. I wanted to hear many different aspects, and I did hear from some of the local farmers who are concerned about how it would impact them. On June 5th, I'm going to be hearing a speaker in Bradford who will talk about studies that have shown the impacts of extending the Greenbelt on farmers, and I've been receiving some information from other sources that I plan to study a little further. And having gathered all that information, I may revisit the motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. Okay, so do we have any notices of motion? Okay, I don't see any. Items for future consideration. Councillor McConkey.
To do this on a busy night, but one thing is the front gardens with our Canada 150 celebration coming up and the tea here and that, I would like to see some, make sure that the weeding and maybe we buy some additional flowers or something. I know the flags look great, but we need something. This is our statement this year. So even if we have to look at sponsors or whatever, I think, if it becomes part of the Canada 150 group to look at, or I don't know how we do it, but I think that needs to be looked at and give guidance on how we go ahead. I'm not a good gardener. I don't volunteer. The second thing is deputations. I know in deputations we usually like to have the material in advance and on the agenda. I would recommend in future that we do not accept a deputation unless we have the material in advance, because I believe as a councillor and as all of us, we like transparency, we like to know what we're coming for the meeting for, and I just think it's in good stance that everybody, we come prepared. I would like the deputer to be prepared and provide us with the information in advance, and I don't know if it's a procedure bylaw or what we have to do to change that, but I would like that looked at because it causes issues.
Okay, I'll turn to the clerk.
The procedural bylaw doesn't state that a presentation has to be submitted. We do have deputations that just speak, that don't have an official PowerPoint, don't provide speaking notes. Council may wish to put a clause in the procedural bylaw stating that all delegations must have a presentation and they must be submitted by a certain date beforehand to be included on the agenda. But I haven't seen that in any procedure bylaw that I've come across. I would highly recommend not putting that in, but it would be up to council to decide.
Councillor McConkey?
And if, I understand that some will just come with speaking, and that's fine, but when you come and do a presentation and give information and that should be provided in advance. If it's not, I think it has to be made clear that no recommendation should come out of that without, because we really haven't been given it due diligence. So for a motion or something to come from a councillor after a deputation that you haven't seen, it's very difficult. So I think we need to protect ourselves in that way.
Turn to the clerk again.
And that is the intent, that the information is just received and that council has time to digest it, especially if it's, if there's a lot of information behind it. Council should be following the proper process of submitting a notice of motion, but we see that tend to be waived if it's something small. Like if the school showed up and asked for a small donation, council seems to be tabling motions that way. It makes it difficult to put in a set rule stating that council will not do this because council may supersede their procedure bylaw and change the rules. I would highly suggest that if that happens and you're not in agreement with it, that at the debate, that's when that information should be brought up. But generally, the acceptable practice is to just receive the delegation, and if anything's to come out of it, for it to be a notice of motion or be brought up to a subsequent meeting.
Okay. Any other items?
Is that not, I guess, based on the clerk's advice, and I don't know how other councillors feel about having a delegation when it's substantial to have it in advance, especially when the time limit's being increased. How do other people feel on that?
Well, I guess my comment is, we are trying to be transparent and flexible, and the clerk and I did discuss the delegation you're speaking of, and it is a significant situation in the township, so we felt that they could be heard, and we would, at the will of council, and the council agreed to extend the time. That wasn't something we dictated in advance. And I think we addressed their things. I think possibly the delegates would have liked us to do something, but it would have been inappropriate for us to do something because we do have to digest it and seek advice. So I think our procedural bylaw works well. I didn't have a problem with it the way it is. Does anybody suggest that we should alter it? Because I think it leaves us a bit of flexibility, and I think we want the flexibility. I mean, yes, it's difficult seeing all and hearing all that, but as soon as I started hearing it, quite honestly, I said, well, obviously I hope nobody tables a motion because I need a lot more information. And of course, because that was such a detailed and very well done, that it would have been appropriate if there's going to be a motion, it would be presented in a notice of motion rather than off the tail end of that. We're not, because again, there's a lot of ramifications from that presentation, not like, can we have $100 to go on a trip or something like that. So, Deputy Mayor Allen?
Yes, I agree with that. There was a lot of content there, and I put forward the possibility, but then seeing the extent of the presentation, it makes sense to refer it to staff and just take it a step at a time. And that gives us the opportunity to read it, digest it, and speak with our legal counsel. So in conclusion, I don't think that we should make a blanket requirement to bring forward written materials or presentations beforehand.
Yeah, we request as much information in advance, but I don't think we want the hard and fast rule. And so it works, and we might come across something that doesn't work, and then I guess we have to consider it at that time. Okay, moving on. Is that, oh, sorry, CEO Brindley.
Sir, Mayor French, I wouldn't mind addressing the first comment. I actually prefer it not be dealt with like as an item for future consideration, but I know what Councilor McConkey's talking about. Our summer crew's here, so we'll do a maintenance of the building. We do first thing. My concern is with the LEED certification, the intent is not to plant lots of flowers that you're going to water and stuff. That said, we'll look at something we can do to, not just make it look, presentable, but look at some things we can do, especially with the event coming up and things happening. So leave that with staff, and we'll find a creative way of addressing that issue.
Thank you, CEO Brindley. Okay, I think we've heard everything, so I need a mover and a seconder for the bylaws. Can I have a mover? Okay, McConkey, Austin. That the bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried. And now I need a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw. Oh, Hannah and McConkey. That bylaw 2017-041 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on May 17, 2017, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. And an adjournment bylaw. I think we'll always have, Councillor Ritchie, would you like to move that one? Seconder? Austin. That the regular meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 9:48 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on June 7, 2017 at 6:30 p.m. in the Council Chambers Administrative Center, Minising. All those in favor? Carried. And for anybody that's still watching us at home, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for council for really engaging in everything that was on the agenda. It's a very good evening, and thank you.